This meeting of the Starkville Board of Aldermen will now come to order. Please rise for the saying of the Pledge of Allegiance, after which Alderman Baldwin would like to yield to Judge Carpenter to lead us in a word of prayer, and we will observe a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let us pray. Eternal Father, we come now bowed down before a loving God, the giver of every good and perfect gift. We thank you, dear Master, for your goodness and mercy that endureth forever. We thank you for the city of Starkville, and we uplift this agenda of our mayor and vice mayor and aldermen and alderwomen. God, we thank you, dear Master, for their dedication, for their commitment to their community. Thank you for all of our departmental heads. And we pray that everything will continue to go in decency and in order, that you will be pleased. Now, Lord, we pray that you just continue to give wisdom, and God, we pray that you just continue to give comfort. Let everything be done, that we respect one another, that we love one another, that you be glorified. We love you. We thank you again for your divine protection. Thank you for those who are protecting the people and serving the people. Thank you for those who are protecting our property. Thank you for those who are doing all the street work, every aspect that needs to be taken care of. We thank you for our leaders again, for it's in his name we pray. Amen. Amen.
You have before you a copy of the written agenda. Are there any proposed revisions to the agenda as written? Alderman Mayor.
Mayor, I'd like to add an item to the agenda under Board Business X, item F, consideration of appointing a city election commissioner to take the place of Kayla Gilmore, who, because of qualifying today for an elected position, can no longer serve in that role.
All right, the proposed revision by Alderman Maynard is to add an item F under Roman numeral 10, board business. The item would read as follows: the consideration of appointing a city election commissioner to replace Kayla Gilmore. Alderman Maynard, is that your proposed revision?
Yes, sir.
Do I hear any objection? Any objection? Any objection? Any objection? Seeing none, your agenda's been revised. Alderman Maynard, do you have any further proposed revisions?
No, sir.
Any further proposed revisions? Alderman Walker.
Mr. Mayor, I would like to move under Department Business number Roman numeral 11, B, Community Development Partner, number 2, Planning, A, B, C, D, and E, to A under Mayor's Business.
So that is all 5 items under planning.
Yes.
The proposed revision, and you wish to keep them in the order
That's
that they were
fine.
originally listed?
Yes.
The proposed revision from Alderman Walker is to move all 5 items under Roman numeral 11, B2, planning, to mayor's business in their original order. To the beginning of mayor's business in their original order. Alderman Walker, is that your proposed revision?
Yes.
Do I hear any objection? Any objection? Any objection? Any objection? Seeing none, your agenda's been revised. Alderman Walker, do you have any further proposed revision?
No.
Alderman Wynn.
Thank you so much. Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of the board. Tonight, I'm going to ask that we put some basic things on consent, if we will. We're expecting a very lengthy meeting tonight, as we have total of 4 public hearings. We have many of our business clients who are being represented by counsel. And I'm just, out of respect for that, I'm just going to ask that we put the following items on consent. Page 3, under board business, item A.
Item B.
It's under board business. Consideration and approval of advertising for letters of interest for the appointment to a position on the Starkville Activity Hall Consolidated School District Board of Trustees.
So the proposed revision by Alderman Wynn is to place item Roman numeral 10A, the consideration and approval of advertising for letters of interest for an appointment to a position on the Starkville Activity Hall Consolidated School District Board of Trustees, on a consent agenda. Alderman Wynn, is that your proposed revision?
It is.
Do I hear any objection?
Mr. Mayor, may I recognize?
You may.
Mr. Mayor, with all due respect to my colleague from 2, I certainly want to just proceed with this as best as we can and professional as we can, and I certainly do not want to deviate from our method of handling the agenda at this time, and maybe that's something that we can look at somewhere down the road, but tonight I would like to just proceed with the agenda. The only reason I had no objection to the change from the gentleman from 4 because it was a good thing to move those planning items right near the public hearing, so those items were not removed from the agenda. So I think we'll have us a good night here. We have a lot of citizens in here who are all interested in our board meeting, and I think it would be good open government. We'll make some good decisions tonight, so I'm all excited about them being here. I'm no rush to leave, and I think we just need to be here as long as we need to be here. And I certainly give great respect to the colleague from 2. I certainly do not look down on what she asked for. She means well. I want to thank her for understanding that, and I really appreciate her acknowledging my professionalism with respect to her request to place this on consent. So with those things being said, Mr. Mayor, I would like to proceed with the agenda as it is published.
Alderman Perkins, do you object?
Yes, sir. I object to any consent agenda tonight.
All right, Alderman Perkins has objected to the placement of that matter on the consent agenda, and since he has made it clear that he will object to any matter being placed on the consent agenda, I would rule any proposed revision to do so dilatory at this point. Alderman
And let
Nguyen.
me say this, Mayor and Vice Mayor, members of the board, I don't have any more suggestions for the consent agenda. However, our board meetings are pretty much 4.5 to 5 hours. And after everyone else is gone, we still have executive session where our board handles very sensitive legal matters as well as personnel matters. And there are some board members that sometimes, because of their work hours or need to be at work in a timely fashion in the morning time, they are needing to leave the board meetings, and it leaves us with not a full board, and I'm getting very concerned about that. I yield the floor at this time.
Are there any further proposed revisions to the agenda? Any further proposed revisions? Any further proposed revisions? Seeing none, a motion to approve the agenda as revised is in order.
So moved.
Motion has been made by Alderman Carver to approve the agenda as revised. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion has been seconded by Alderman Nguyen. Alderman Carver, do you wish to speak on the merits?
No, sir.
Any discussion? Any discussion? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Motion clearly passes. The first matter you have before you is the consideration of the minutes of the December 6, 2016 meeting of the Mayor and Board
So
of Aldermen.
moved.
Motion has been made by Alderman Nguyen to approve the minutes of the December 6, 2016 meeting of the Mayor and Board of Aldermen of the City of Starkville, Mississippi, incorporating any and all changes as recommended by the City Attorney, otherwise as presented. Alderman Nguyen, is that your motion?
It is.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion has been seconded by Alderman Little. Alderman Nguyen, do you wish to speak on the merits?
No, I do not.
Any discussion? Any discussion? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please signify by saying nay.
Mayor, I'm going to recuse since I was absent.
All right, are you going to abstain?
Since I was absent.
All right, so I have 6 in favor, 0 against, and 1 abstaining, and I have Maynard as abstaining. That said, motion passes. The next matter on the agenda is announcements and comments by the mayor and members of the board. I have no comments this evening. Are there any announcements or comments by the members of the board? Alderman Vaughn.
I'd like to say Happy New Year to everyone out in the audience, and Happy New Year to my board members. But most of all, I just want to thank God for allowing each and every lad us to return after the new year, to start a new year off. I want you to give God all the praise and glory for that. And I want to thank God so much for all that he allowed us to achieve in 2016, and hoping that we can do a little better than we did in 17. Most of all, concerned and talking about the quality of life for everybody, that we be concerned about the quality of life for everybody. And one thing, I'm so glad that I thank God for allowing me to be elected to be Alderman in Ward 7. But I was elected by the people in Ward 7. But I'm an Alderman for the city of Starkville. I thank God for that. I don't pick just my ward. But we talk about the quality of life. We should look for the quality of life for every citizen of Starkville, not just our own individual ward, because this is real. This whatever decision that we make is affect our children and grandchildren down through the life. So I hope we just consider that and be mindful of that. decision that we make is it's a wise decision, and we just continue to look for God for our decision and stop leaning and depending on our own understanding, because we're not always right what we do. If we look for the peoples and what best for the peoples in their ward, what Ward 6 might need, I might not need that in Ward 7. What Ward 1 might need, I might not need that in there. But whatever need that Ward 7 need, that's the need we be trying to fulfill, regardless of what the obligation, regardless of the roadblocks in front of. We should be mindful and honest and fair with one another, whatever decision that we make. Sometimes we make biased decisions because on what area it's in. But just like I say, what in Ward 3, I might not need that in Ward 7. But whatever I need in Ward 7, I need that. And whatever is needed in another ward, that's the way I cast my vote, because of the need of the people, not the need of Henry Vaughn, the need of the people. Mr. Mayor, hurt my heart that you're not returning. Appreciate all the time that you and I spent, bumps and bruises, but we moved on. We continued to love one another. We did not disrespect one another. Mr. Chairman, I'm really hurt. It took me a hard time to make my decision to whether I was going to do this again, but the people said go, but I listened to the Spirit. That's the only reason I'm here again. I will run again only because of the Spirit that leads and guides and directs me every day the way I should go. And I pray that this board, this mayor, from these last 11 board meetings we got after this, I hope will we be led and guided and directed by the Holy Spirit, not in on our own understanding, because we continue to lead on our own understanding, we continue to let the city of Starkville down. Mr. Mayor, thank you, and I yield the floor.
Any further comments by the members of the board? Alderman Nguyen.
Good evening and Happy New Year, everyone. Mr. Buddy Sanders, will you please come forward? And by the way, thank you, Alderman Vaughn. Mr. Sanders?
Yes, ma'am.
A young lady, and I'll call her a young lady from Alderman Vaughn's ward, called me about 3 days ago. She asked me, why had I not called you forward so that you could tell how much under this board new development that the city has incurred as a result of the leadership of the mayor and members of this board. Will you please state that for her, please?
Oh, at the amount?
Yes, a ballpark amount.
Oh, over $200 million.
Over $200 million. Thank you so much, Mr. Sanders.
Thank you.
Okay. Chief Nichols, if you will you please come forward? Chief Nichols, last month on 12/23, the next day, I woke up and this was on my car and I said, oh my goodness, what have I done? And it's actually from the Starkville Police Department Apple program, and it was placed on my car. I really wasn't familiar with this, so will you please tell the mayor and the members of the board about this in case they are not familiar with it either?
Yes, actually, that program got started several years ago. It was an idea brought to us from then Assistant Chief John Outlaw. He had gone to some training, and a member from some other city was doing it. So he brought it to us. We started doing it. It's approximately 15 years ago, about 12 years ago. And that's something we've done throughout the years. And of course, when I got to be appointed chief, that's something that we continue doing.
And thank you so much. And let me say this, if you wake up and you see one of these on your car, you've not done anything. Our police officers are in your neighborhood watching over you, and you'll see one of these along. So I think it's great. Chief, another something. We have not been updated on the renovation of the police department since November 1st of 2016. Will you be prepared to do that at our next recess meeting?
We will be prepared to do it next meeting.
Okay, and thank you so much.
Yes, ma'am.
And thank you. You may take your seat. Chief Yarber, will you please come forward? Chief, thank you so much. Chief Yarber, will you tell the mayor and vice mayor and the members of the board about your little honorary fireman that I've heard that you have over there at the fire department?
Yes,
And don't
sir.
say his last name since we don't have him.
We're the 3-0, his first name is Nathan, actually in your neighborhood. He wanted to be a firefighter. That's all he wanted to do. He's a cancer survivor, 3 years old. So he wanted to be a firefighter. So Saturday, we went and picked him up from his house, brought him to the station, and we had Christmas at the station. We guys pitched in, bought him some toys. So his family was very excited. He was too. He smiled the whole time. And like I said on our Facebook post, he actually thought that we did him a favor, but he actually did us a favor. So, and I thank the board for allowing us to be in the neighborhoods and be in our community. So really appreciate it. And he's really excited right now. I talked to his parents on Sunday, and he's still talking about the whole time. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Chief Yarborough. And my last comments are, I would be remiss if I didn't say this. At the last board meeting, the members of this board approved the request for the Walmart neighborhood market to proceed. I want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart for the people here in Starkville that reached out to me to call me, email me, and text me. That was not my doing. It takes a team of people like the board members that I work with and other people that were assigned to the Walmart project to make that happen. Local attorney Johnny Moore, who was their representative, Mr. Ewing, who was their representative, and the other council out of Jackson. I want to say thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. It was never about me, but what it was about for the people and the residents on that side of town that needed somewhere to go shopping, and for the people that are in our county that were no longer shopping in our city, but yet were shopping in the local cities close to our city. So again, I want to say thank you so much for your calls and your texts as it related to that Walmart measure. It's one of my greatest accomplishments being on this board. Thank you. Mayor, I yield the floor.
Any further comments by the members of the board? Any further comments? Any further comments? Seeing none, we'll move to citizen comments. At this time, any citizen wishing to make comments may do so by coming forward, introducing yourself, and you'll be recognized to speak for a maximum of 3 minutes.
Happy New Year to everyone. My name is Alvin Tonamore, Ward 7. I'm recognized by Mayor Perkins, Alderman Vaughn, Alderman Walker.
Thank you, Alan.
To the police chief, the citizens would like for me to give a few and find out what all of these places are, so that sometimes they feel comfortable talking with me and expect for me to know. So at your early convenience, we can get together and you can show me where everything is, and I can help them. Let us be very mindful. This gun situation is getting out of hand, way out of hand. We can do something if we would stand as a voice, and the people that we put in office in Washington and all are that we be careful that everybody don't need weapons because they don't know what to do with them, and that's just some serious concerns of the citizens.
Thank you, Mr. Turner. Further citizen comments? Do we have any further citizen comments?
Good evening. My name is Walter Conley. I noticed that you will have an appointment of a school board member sometimes this year, and I spoke to you previously about the appointment of school board members and the appointment of the superintendent. It is imperative that school board members be interviewed extensively potential school board members be interviewed extensively to make sure that they understand how school districts operate. I would like for you to consider as a board in this next process to appoint a panel of individuals with backgrounds in education and screen those applicants and narrow them down to maybe 2 and bring those forward to you, as opposed to this board interviewing 7 or 8 candidates for maybe, I don't know for how long. But I just feel that it is extremely important that this school district, if it's going to move forward, you're going to have to screen school board members a little more extensively, because As I stated, just because a person works with the PTA or the Booster Club, that does not necessarily qualify them to serve on the school board. The school district is big business. There's no question about it. And it's a large organization, and those people who are in charge of operating it, those people need to really understand the ins and outs. And so I'm just going to suggest you consider appointing a panel that will screen and interview these particular individuals and probably select 2 of them and bring them to you as a board. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Conlon. Any further citizen comment?
I'm Michelle Amos, I'm Ward 3, and I understand that I have been accused of a conflict of interest. I'd like to read a statement. As the largest company in Starkville real estate market, it is inevitable that Coldwell Banker SRE Realtors will be involved in transactions as our community grows and develops. As chair of the Greater Starkville Development Partnership and chair of the Golden Triangle Development Link, I am placed in a unique position from which to contemplate and understand Starkville's economic development opportunities, or up until now, the lack thereof. I have a history of supporting growth and development in Starkville, and I proudly stand behind that history. As a general principle, I do not advocate for projects we are involved in as a company because I don't want any perceived conflict of interest to be an issue. I also advocate strongly for projects that don't involve my company but will make Starkville a better place. However, this is not the time to stand quietly and allow yet another opportunity to die on the vine. I stand behind the proposed industrial park because it's time our community leadership takes a stand for what is required for future growth and development in Starkville. I stand behind it because it's time we create living wage jobs for our citizens. This is the only answer to the embarrassingly high poverty rate in our community. I stand behind it because the taxes paid as a result of industrial manufacturing can make a huge difference in our schools. I stand behind it because I've been part of the successes in our neighboring counties, and I want to see those same successes in Octavia County. And I stand behind it because I believe we have to start investing now in order to ensure a brilliant future for our community. I do not stand behind the proposed industrial park on Highway 82 and 389 because our company is representing 76 out of the 384 available acres. I stand behind it because it's the right choice for Starkville. I've been asked many times why I commit my time and financial support to the partnership and the link, and the answer is consistent. If we don't believe in our community, who will? I believe in Starkville, and that is why I'm standing proudly behind my support of the proposed industrial site. And if I may, I'd like to hand y'all a copy of my statement now.
Thank you, Ms. Amos.
Thank you.
Do we have any further citizen comment?
Good evening to everybody. I want to go on and get my minutes so I can have them. I would just like to say Happy New Year's to each and every one of you. And I would also like to say to everybody that's gathered tonight, I'm going to go on and say, man, about what I expect from you all to have on the school board, to have the selection on the school board. Because this coming winter is coming up, and it may be snowing, and I may not even get up that ramp down there. I won't have to fall back down. But I would just like to say, my qualifications, and I'm going to tell you, like this. I'm going to tell you what my qualifications are. We should have someone, I don't care how many you had to interview, if it's 56, we should have somebody who's concerned about our community, our schools, and also somebody who would be a voice. Not just a voice from one town, and that's Mississippi. We need a voice here of Octavia County. They need to be a black person. And I'm going to say it like that. You need to consider having a black person, because if you look at the makeup of the school board, then it should be a black woman. Because we don't have that. Like Trump said, the women's that's there, where we are, we're here, but we got a lot of seats. And I would like you to consider that. If I can't speak anymore, if you have to come to my film and look at me, I want you to know that these are what I'm looking for. I don't care how many you got to qualify. If they come in and qualify right, we got qualifications now going on for positions here on the Board of Aldermen. Well, we're gonna have a lot of people that come up here and say, I was this and I was that, but you won at one meeting, how you gonna serve us? That's what I wanna know, how you gonna serve us? Parker, you been good. I'ma just tell you, yeah, I talked about you last time, but you know, I'll talk about you again, you know that. But I'm just saying the things that, and you've been good too, Mr. Scott Maine. I ain't forgot you. You know, but the rest of you that's coming aboard, you know, gonna come back and be considered for re-election. We need to be fair and practical of what we do. Mississippi State is out there, Hall County is right here, and we need it. And so I'm gonna ask you to please consider that. And I'm not scared to ask, and I'm just gonna put it on the line like it's supposed to be. And if it's not supposed to be on there, write about me tomorrow and tell me, and call me and tell me. I got a hook up that said who called me, so call me and I'll listen to you. But I would just like to say, please, consider what you're doing. This is all County. And how about them Bulldogs? I didn't hear nothing about them Bulldogs. Come on now. How about them Bulldogs? Now, any other time we be saying, oh, we proud. What about Dak Prescott? We ain't got no Dallas fans up in here. I wasn't now, but now I'm one. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, Ms. Isaac. Is there any further citizen comment? Any further citizen comment? Any further citizen comment? Any further citizen comment? Seeing none, we'll move to public appearances. We have no public appearances this evening, so we'll move to public hearings. Our first public hearing is on the proposed billboard moratorium. Mr. Sanders, would you like to introduce the matter?
I don't have much to say. This is just the first hearing of two concerning moratorium on billboards. Giving staff until the end of February to propose an ordinance to the board.
Questions or comments by the members of the board? Are there any questions or comments by the members of the board? Any questions or comments? Seeing none, we'll move to the public comment portion of the public hearing. We'll hear from anyone who wishes to speak on this matter for a maximum of 3 minutes. Same procedure as we used for citizen comments. Is there anyone now wishing to speak? Is there anyone now wishing to speak?
How are y'all? My name's Brian Fikes. I'm with Lamar Advertising. And I guess I really just had one question for all of you. You know, I understand about a 6-month moratorium. We deal with this all the time. What is the end game that you folks hope to achieve after this moratorium and moving forward? That's my question.
Is that the conclusion of your comments, Mr. Fikes?
No, I'm not finished yet, but I just want to make that clear that that's the number one thing that we're concerned about is being the largest holder of outdoor advertising here in the city of Starkville. That being said, moving forward, we have no issues with the moratorium. We're willing to work with you however we can. We don't want to cause any sorts of problems in any way with the city. And, you know, what we'd ask for is that with us being the largest holder of outdoor advertising, that y'all consult possibly with us and let us give you some ideas in cities that we've done across the state of Mississippi in the past. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fikes. Is there anyone else wishing to speak on the matter? Is there anyone else wishing to speak on the matter? Anyone else wishing to speak? Seeing no one, are there any concluding comments from the members of the board? Any concluding comments from the members of the board? Any concluding comments? City Attorney is asked to be recognized. All right, the City Attorney has recommended that we pass an order to have a second public hearing. Is there anyone now that wishes to make that motion?
So moved.
Motion has been made by Alderman Little to call for a second public hearing on a proposed billboard moratorium to be held at the January 17, 2017 recess meeting of the Mayor and Board of Aldermen. Alderman Little, is that your motion?
It is.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion's been seconded by Alderman Vaughn. Alderman Little, do you wish to speak on the merits?
Sure. In speaking to your question, our end goal here would be to strengthen our overall ordinance. If you've driven down Highway 12, as most of us have to do on a daily basis, there's several located, and some of them even double stacked, from one end to the other. And now we're at the other end, we're starting. I think 2 were added back in 15. We've had 1 recently added, and I think 1 in the pipeline to be added this month. So, personal opinion, we've got the sign ordinance. I think, when does it go, Mr. Mayor, does it go into effect, the grandfather clause of 20 or 21?
21.
So all city signs, business signs are going to be lowered to the monument-style signs at that point, and they're really going to stick out like sore thumbs at that point. The ones that are here to stay, and the businesses that choose to advertise on them are still going to have those available to advertise. But going forward, we just want to look at limiting further additions of those. And you can appreciate that, I'm sure. It's not going to be removing any of them. I understand that's your way of life and your livelihood. But, some folks sell cigarettes, but I'm not going to start smoking them. So that's all I've got, Mayor.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, please signify by saying nay.
Nay.
By a vote of 6 in favor with 1 against. And I have Carver as the dissenting vote. Motion passes. The next matter before us is RZ 16-11, the rezoning matter related to the industrial park. Mr. Sanders, would you like to introduce?
Yes, I will turn it over to Mr. Howland, who will brief the board on the applicant's proposal.
Let her set up. Yeah. Let the court reporter set up.
One of the parties related to this matter has asked to have a court reporter present this evening, so we're going to give the court reporter a moment to set up so that she can begin taking notes. You can't hear the presenters. Make sure your mic's on. Hello? Hello?
Lights on.
Pull it closer to you.
It's on.
Just speak as loudly as you can. And if you would, tell me when you're ready.
RZ 16-11, this is a request by Golden Triangle Development Inc. to rezone several properties located on the corner of North Jackson Street and Highway 82 to M1 for the proposed industrial park. The subject property rezoning request is from C2, R5, R4 to M1. The property's to the north is zoned R4, R5, and is currently undeveloped agricultural. Property to the east is R1, C2, and is currently undeveloped residential. Property to the west is R5, C2, and is currently undeveloped. Property to the south is C2, A1, and is currently undeveloped. 9 property owners of record within 300 feet of the subject property were notified directly by mail of this request. Public hearing notice was published in the Starkville Daily News on December 19, 2016, and a sign was posted on the property concurrent with the publication of the notice. On December 13, 2016, the Planning and Zoning Commission voted 5-0 to recommend approval of the request with 2 conditions. On December 19, 2016, a petition with 12 signatures against the proposed rezoning was received by the Planning Department. 4 petitioners were determined to own property within the 160-foot area, zone buffer area of the subject area. The petitioners owned 100% of the property to the west, which On this map here, they're color-coded in yellow. They own 50% of the property to the east, and 75% of the property to the north, and 17% of the property to the south. A rezoning can only take place if one of the following conditions prevails. Error, there is no error, change in condition. The completion of Highway 82 in 2005 has opened up this area for new development opportunities. The completion of Highway 82 has changed the area from being limited access agricultural undeveloped area to a highway accessible area suitable for an industrial site. The Planning and Zoning Commission recommended 2 conditions as part of the approval. If the property were to be rezoned M1, a buffer yard would be required per landscape ordinance, section 8, buffer yard, in the screening of the manufacturing from other uses. Just to let it be known, as the code reads, that would be a 40-foot buffer with 160 plant units per 100 feet. If the property, condition 2 is if the property does not go forward, the project does not go forward, the property shall revert back to its original state.
Are there any questions or comments from the members of the board?
Mr. Mayor, I have one
City
question.
attorneys asked to be recognized.
I'll defer to the vice mayor.
Alderman Perkins.
Yes, sir. Mr. Sanders, in order for there to be rezoning, as I understand it, 1 or 2 things must occur. One of the criteria that must occur is that there has to be an error in the zoning classification. So my question to you is there an error in the zoning classification?
There are areas where I wish the zone lines would have been different, but no significant errors.
Okay, I want you to answer my question either yes or no.
No.
So there's been no error in the zoning classification of this subject property? At some point during the discussion, you can do it now, you can do it later. The second condition that has to occur, according to the Supreme Court, there was a case that was decided as late as June of 2016, Little versus Mayor, June 21, 2016. And there's a case of Board of Aldermen versus Connolly that was decided May 20, 1987 by the Mississippi Supreme Court. And the other condition that has to happen, of course, so the record is clear that there's no error in the zoning, so we can eliminate that one. So the other condition that has to happen, according to state law, in order for there to be a change in the zoning classification, there has to be clear and convincing evidence that there has been a change in the character of the neighborhood that to the extent that justifies a rezoning and that there exists a public need for the rezoning. So before we can get to the public need, you got to get to the change in the character of the neighborhood. Now, the Supreme Court did not say just a change in the character of the neighborhood. It says a change in the character of the neighborhood to the extent. So at some point before you all rest, the city rests this evening, I want you to elaborate on that. You don't have to go into it right now, but I want you at some point before the city finishes with this presentation to tell me what is the change in the character of the neighborhood to the extent that justifies the rezoning and that the public need requires and justifies the rezoning, and there has to be a clear and convincing evidence, not sufficient. And the Supreme Court is held to a high standard, and that's the highest standard that you can have. But at some point, you don't have to do it right now, but at some point, since the floor is open for questions, I want to make sure I preserve that point for the record and that we get that in, because I'm going to, as the different persons come up this evening, I'm going to ask that question as to the change in the character. And I want some clear and convincing evidence. So, I want to make sure that that I do my job in terms of asking that. So at some point, I want that answer. But Mr. Mayor, I'm going to yield the floor at this point.
Any further questions or comments? City attorneys asked to be recognized.
Mr. Haviland, you outlined who were the objecting parties and where they were positioned on the map. Do you have a recommended factual finding to this board about whether the 20% objection criteria has been triggered to necessitate a 3/5 supermajority vote?
Yes, on 3 sides.
It has been?
Yes.
Thank you.
Mayor.
Per the advice of the city attorney and the city planner, this vote, if there is one taken tonight, will require a 3/5 supermajority. That means 5 members of the Board of Aldermen must vote in the affirmative to effectuate the rezoning. Alderman Carver, did you wish to be recognized?
Yes, sir. So other than a scrivener's error, it has to be a change. I was going to ask the city attorney for, I've seen it go both ways on these, honestly. So it's got to be clear and convincing change of character in the neighborhood. Is that or there exists a need, and could the job creation aspect be deemed as a public need for this type of rezoning?
The test is change in the neighborhood to such an extent as to justify the proposed rezoning and a public need for the proposed rezoning. So that's not in the disjunctive, that's conjunctive, that's and. Both of those things have to be met, change and public need. And the case law does recognize those type of statistics, job creation, tax benefits, as being factors of public need that you can consider.
Are there any further questions or comments by the members of the board? Any further? Alderman Nguyen.
I think I'm very concerned. I think about the residents or the property owners that have ridden us, but I also think about our city as a whole. We are poised tonight as members of the board, and it will take 5 of us to embrace this. I can tell you now that I support it. We're talking about jobs for our community, economic, it assists with our tax revenue. It's our version of Yokohama, only Yokohama is in West Point, but I'm calling this the Yokohama. I also looked at it this weekend as winning the lottery for our city. I hope that 4 other members of this board will join me. I've said this before, and I'll say it again, and I don't care who I anger. College is not for everyone, and not everyone around you or near you will attend college and go on to have a 4-year college degree or their bachelor, along with their a master's degree. So for people like that, this presents an opportunity where you go and you get some work skill, and you go into a park that has employers that offer you $17 to $20 an hour. This is just too good to turn down. And again, I am respectful of the residents in that area. I am respectful of the property owners. And I think about my mom when she got ready to build a house when we were probably about 11 years old, and she didn't want anyone around us. You know what she did? She purchased the property. If you can't do that, sometimes you just have to move on, and we have to accept that change comes our way. I don't want to let a few people hinder development here in our city. I've said it once, I'm going to say it again. I support this wholeheartedly, and tonight I hope that 4 members of this board will join me. I'm there. Mayor, I yield the floor.
Are there any further questions or comments by the members of the board? Any further questions or comments from the members of the board? Seeing none, we'll move into the public comment portion of the public hearing, and I'll conduct this a little bit differently than we conducted the public hearing on the proposed ordinance a moment ago. In this case, we'll have equal time given to parties on both sides of the matter. We'll begin with the applicant. Now, ordinarily in this case, I give each side 15 minutes. But I did receive a request from one of the parties that is opposed to this matter for an extension of time. I'm going to grant that request, and I'm going to give each side 30 minutes in this case. So we'll hear a maximum of 30 minutes from the applicant, and should you wish to split your time, since you don't have the benefit of hearing from those opposed to the matter, you can save some time at the end. And I just ask that you tell me that on the front end. And then we'll hear 30 minutes from those opposed to the rezone. Now, I would ask both sides, please talk amongst yourselves as best you can, and certainly to maintain the decorum of the meeting as quietly as you can. Decide how you might want to divide your 30-minute block of time. And if you have that decision made, please have the first person in your party that comes up to speak tell me how you'd like to divide your time. If nobody tells me how you'd like to divide your time, the city clerk will keep a running clock, and when we hit 30 minutes, your time has been exhausted. Do we have a representative for the applicant who now wishes to speak?
We're lawyers carrying large briefcases. Mr. Mayor, Chris Pace here for the Golden Triangle Development Link, the applicant tonight. We would ask to split our time. I have a bit of a presentation I'd like to go through quickly. I want to introduce some folks from the community that are here in support of the proposed rezoning, but we would like to split our time. I can't tell you exactly when we'll finish our presentation, but whatever time is left on the clock, less than 30 minutes, we'd like to reserve to address any comments from the public or questions that we can answer at the end of this.
All right, provided that you have time remaining when you've completed your remarks, you can use those in rebuttal.
To keep myself square, I'm getting my own clock going here. I have with me tonight several folks, leaders from the Starkville community that are here tonight in support of the project. They're not going to speak at length, but we did ask them to come up and just quickly voice their support and introduce themselves.
Again, I am Michelle Amos. I am with Coldwell Banker here in town. I represent the partnership and the chair, both the partnership and the link as chair. I'm obviously in support of this project. I want to go on the public record as being such, and then I will yield the remainder of my time to Mr. Pace to address the need.
I'm David Shaw. I'm the Vice President for Research and Economic Development at Mississippi State University and a member of the board for the Greater Starkville Development Partnership. I support this application and will yield my time to Mr. Pace.
I'm Steve Langston, Sullivan's Office Supply. I represent not only the business community but also the partnership board, and I'm on the executive committee of the Development Link. Spend a lot of my free time trying to do industrial and economic growth in the community, and once again I think Mr. Pace would make a better presentation.
I'm Jack Wallace. I'm president of the Old Cedar organization. I'm a stranger to most of you. I've been in business here for, seems like 100 years, but it's about 55 years. So long time proponent of Starkville and Occipial County. And I yield the rest of my time to Mr. Pace.
I'm Larry Mullins. I'm a lifelong resident of Starkville, a businessman, have LPL Financial, and I also support this project, and I would like to yield my time to Chris Pace.
Thank you all. And before we get to addressing the two elements that the Vice Mayor kindly pointed out earlier, I have some materials to be entered into the record tonight. No doubt should be in the copies there for everyone. These are just simply some of the documents we'll be referencing, copies of some of the poster boards and some of the reports we'll be citing to as part of this. Before we get to the elements the Vice Mayor raised, that are prerequisites for an approved rezoning, the applicant has taken the opportunity over the past week in an effort to address some of the concerns raised by some of the adjoining landowners at the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting, some that have been filtered through this board, some that have been raised directly with the link. If you look in your packet, the very first handout behind the index are a list of proposed conditions that we are asking this board to consider. If you elect to approve the rezoning, we would ask that these conditions be placed on that rezoning. I think some concerns were raised about what type of industries could be located out here. These restrictions that we're asking to be imposed on the rezoning as a condition to the approval address some of those uses that probably none of us would want to live next to in an industrial park. They include a prohibition against pawn shops, cash for gold shops, car title lenders, those types of activities that are allowed now with certain conditional uses in the C2 portion of the existing property. It would prohibit sexual-oriented businesses that would be allowed under a conditional use. It would prevent rubbish, garbage, trash dumps sanitary landfills. It would prevent slaughterhouses, stockyards, no mining activities, no drilling for subsurface minerals to the extent that the acquirer of the property ends up with the mineral rights. It would prohibit any manufacturing of concrete or asphalt. It would prevent any scrap metal yard or other similar salvage yards that would otherwise be allowed in an M1 designation. It would prohibit manufacturing or storage of hazardous chemicals or fertilizers. It would prohibit the storage or disposal of hazardous waste. We also, in specific response to a concern raised by a member of the Bell family about the fact that there's a buffer yard requirement on the north end of the property that we're actually to be rezoned. There is not a buffer requirement against the right-of-way for 389, and we're also asking for a condition to be imposed on the property that a 30-foot buffer be required back from 389, and basically a prohibition against cutting any existing vegetation or trees that are within that 30-foot buffer now, except to the extent we need access for a road or for public utilities, or to the extent the city makes a determination that something had to be cut for public safety concerns. You can't see oncoming traffic and that sort of thing. But we have provided a copy of that to Mr. Bobel to share with members of his family. He was one of the signatories on the petition protesting the rezoning approval by the Planning and Zoning Commission. We haven't had really a chance to chat with them in furtherance of that to get any comments or feedback, but we did want to go ahead and get that out there tonight and let the members of the board know we do want that to be considered as a condition and limitation on the zoning if it's approved.
And Mr. Pace, is that writing anywhere in this packet? Forgive me if you.
It's on the very second page. Should be right behind the index.
Sorry. Please continue.
I'll get right to the Vice Mayor's questions earlier about a change in the zone. This is a bit of a unique situation. All the property, of course, north of 82 became included as part of the city boundaries through annexation in the 90s. If you look at how that property is used now, large swaths of several hundred acres are undeveloped real estate, just as this property is. It's either timber or it's in row crops. We are taking the position, as this board will take the position, we'll cite the legal basis for that in a minute, that the entire area along the 82 bypass, and even the north end of 25, that's all undeveloped land zoned as commercial property along the bypass, is in fact the neighborhood. This is all a fairly homogeneous area of property with similar conditions that runs all the way from the 82-25 interchange all the way to the Highway 12 interchange. I drove out there by there this weekend. There are for sale signs about every 200 yards on both sides of the road that say commercial property for sale. This is property that is being marketed for commercial development. It's just not yet being used for commercial development. If we look at uses of property, and to the Vice Mayor's point, changes in the uses of property in the past 10 years since the various bypasses were completed. We've had United Rentals has been constructed on C2 property on the north end of 25. There's a USDA building, that's less than a mile from the subject property. We have the medical clinic and pharmacy at corner 182 and 25. We have a veterinary clinic that's been constructed there during that time period. We have the new auto dealership at the corner of 12 and 82. We have the new Inn project, the La Quinta Inn project, the medical dental offices that were constructed in 2008. This is the land bank office that was away. We have now under development a new Walmart store that was a subject of the last meeting, as well as a new Best Western hotel that is up for development, also at the corner of 82 and 12. We would bring it to the city attorney as well. There is a basis for taking a broad view of the definition of a neighborhood when you have a largely undeveloped area of property that shares similar characteristics. I would refer the board to Cullits v. City of the Iberville. It's a 10-year-old case. The City of the Iberville designated the northern 25% of the City of the Iberville that had been recently annexed as the neighborhood because it shared very common characteristics when considering the approval of the zoning change to allow RV. So we do think there is legal precedent for this board taking a very broad approach and broad views of what constitutes the neighborhood when looking at development in this northern end of Starkville. We do think there have been changes. If you look at the types of changes going on, they are commercial in nature. The C2 property that is part of the subject property, today, of course, it allows such things as restaurants and retail and business offices, but without any conditional use approved by this board, it allows automobile services, it allows warehouse and distribution centers, meaning on that C2 property, we could put a Walmart distribution center today without asking for conditional use and without seeking any further approval other than perhaps site design plans that go through planning and zoning, and would allow light manufacturing with a conditional use approval. As a result of that, we don't think that the proposed change to M1 is a wholesale change to the types of permitted uses that are allowed on a substantial portion of the property today. Matter of fact, I did sort of a blow up there. The nearest commercial activity to this property is the recycling operation by the Oktibbeha County and City of Starkville landfill that's located less than a mile from the subject property on the northeast side. Those represent, Board and Mr. Vice Mayor, the changes in the neighborhood, taking a broad view of the neighborhood that we believe are to such an extent as to justify the requested rezoning to M1. Perhaps we think the more compelling side of this equation, though, is the very clear public need for more property in Starkville for industrial and manufacturing development. The Link team, over the span of the last 2 years, went through an exhaustive search looking for potential properties for the creation of a new industrial park. We went down that path for a period with another section of land on Highway 25 at 182 and 25. Regrettably, that site was ultimately determined to possess some environmental and cultural conditions that make its development cost and time prohibitive. The Cornerstone Park, which is further south down 25, has less than 200 acres available, very little large acreage that's contiguous where you could put a larger operation, and most importantly right now can only serve about 2 megawatts of power. We've been told that may be upgradable between now and 2020 to up to 10 megawatts, but still nothing that could support multiple industrial operations. The other site we looked at was across the road on the east side of 25 near the airport. There were about 100 acres there owned by the school district, Section 16 land that could have been developed. We're limited to 100 acres for an industrial park by statute when dealing with Section 16 land. The problem we had there, though, is again 5 megawatts of power. That was the most we could get right now. But more importantly, we had access issues with 25, and the proposed park really did not jive, for lack of a better word, with the municipal airport authority's long-term development plans for the area, including a possible runway extension, which would have made access to 25 very challenging. The other M1 zoned areas in the city are occupied. We're out of land for industrial development, absent looking in the area that we're asking for rezoning for tonight. And we talk about, this is a park for manufacturing. We talk about manufacturing. I'm sure everybody has sort of ideas about what manufacturing jobs are. There is a desperate need in Starkville and certainly more broadly in Oktibbeha County for higher quality, better paying jobs. The median household income in Oktibbeha County last year was $32,500. I'm rounding by about 15 bucks. You compare that to roughly $40,000 a year per household in the state of Mississippi, $54,000 a year nationally. In 2015, per U.S. Census Bureau statistics, more than a third of Oktibbeha County residents live below the poverty level. Mississippi, if you look in the same report that was provided in your packet tonight to be entered in the record, Mississippi has the lowest median household income and the highest poverty rate of any state in the United States. Oktibbeha County, if you look at the ranking in that packet, is the 14th poorest county in the state, which we found surprising. We knew it was not a good situation, but when you look at the other counties, the counties that are in front of us tend to be in the Delta. If you look at the Golden Triangle area, the next poorest county in the Golden Triangle area is Clay County at number 33. So we have a poverty problem. Perhaps not in Starkville, but in Oktibbeha County. And of course, this proposed industrial park will be a joint venture and development opportunity for both the city and the county together. So, nationally, I think it's important to understand Mississippi is last in the U.S. when it comes to income per household and when it comes to the poverty level. And unfortunately, Oktibbeha County is far closer to the end of the spectrum that you don't want to be in compared to other counties in the state of Mississippi. We mentioned in our application the unemployment rate from a few months ago in Oktibbeha County. It was as high as 7.7, I believe, % back in the middle of this year. It's improved. In October, it was down to 6.3. If you compare that to Mississippi, it's 6.5% for the same period, 5.3% unemployment nationally in October of this year. The final numbers for November are not out yet, but those numbers improved a little bit more for both the county and the state and at a national level. But declining unemployment as a single measure masks a larger dilemma. While more citizens seem to be finding jobs, we believe that they need higher quality, better paying jobs that offer benefits. We have provided in your packet tonight a copy of Appendix B to the city's new comprehensive plan that was approved at the last board meeting, not for purposes of citing to the comprehensive plan itself, but citing to the statistics and analysis performed by Randall Gross Development Economics out of Washington, D.C., and their findings and analysis of socio and economic metrics in the Starkville and Oktibbeha County area. One of their comments cited was Starkville and Oktibbeha County are somewhat dependent on MSU, and there's a need for diversification to help shelter the community from dramatic shifts in university employment. The city and the county enjoy a great relationship with MSU and benefit from the jobs that the university brings and continues to bring. But as you probably have all have heard somebody tell you at some time or another, it's never good to put all your eggs in one basket. Any adverse change at the university has an immediate and direct adverse change and impact on the community. If we look at the last 10 years, which that same study reviewed, and looked at job growth and job declines, Starkville and Oktibbeha County have picked up jobs in hospitality and food service, retail, and healthcare. We lost jobs in manufacturing. Should be no surprise to anyone else that when you think about food service jobs and you think about retail industry jobs, you're typically talking about jobs that if they don't pay minimum wage, the salary level is at the lower end of the spectrum. Those typically do not come with benefits as well. We provided as part of your packet tonight a Department of Labor study that was published earlier this year that compared manufacturing jobs to service sector jobs and the percentage of which industry typically offers retirement benefits, medical benefits. It should be no surprise to anyone that the manufacturing sector, those folks involved in producing things, are far more likely, in some cases twice as likely, to provide medical, dental, and retirement benefits to their employees. Circling back, though, to our lack of industrial property for development in the city, without this park, we're not sure there's another viable site in the city. This fit the bill. It has access to Highway 82 at the 389 interchange. It has a line directly into the city water and sewer system to serve manufacturing customers. The folks at Atmos Gas have been very helpful in committing to run a new gas pipeline from the TETCO line through their facility at Phoebe all the way down to serve the park and its residents. And Ford County Electric has agreed to tap into the TVA transmission line located just a few hundred feet north of this property to put in a new substation at their cost to provide up to 60 megawatts of power to this site. When you compare that with the other smaller properties that we had for industrial development, this one is head and shoulders a more robust industrial park if it's developed. That development can't happen, though, unless it can be rezoned as M1. The folks at the link are certainly, and I am sensitive to the fact that the folks that live in that area are concerned about what could go in this park. If I lived next door or if something was going in next to my house, I would have the same concerns. If we knew what the company that was going to go in there, it makes for a much easier argument. You know what it is. The problem with these type of parks, though, is we're building it at the same time we're recruiting tenants. So we can't state with any degree of certainty yet who is going to go into that park. We do believe that the restrictions that we've asked to be placed on the zoning and conditions on that rezoning address those problems and keep out things that I certainly would not want to live next to, and specifically address some of the concerns raised by the adjoining landowners. With that, we will yield the rest of our time for our rebuttal, Mr. Mayor, but happy to take any questions at this time if there are any.
No, we won't have any questions this time. You'll have 12 minutes and 18 seconds left for your
Thank you.
rebuttal. We'll give Mr. Pace a moment to gather his belongings
It may take a little moment.
before hearing comments from those opposed to the potential issue.
Thank you very much.
All right, and a recap, since it's been a little while, come on up. Please, if you know how you'd like to allocate your time, let me know at the outset. If you don't, then we'll keep a running clock.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the board. It's my privilege to be here before you this evening. My name is Dewey Hembry, and I'm here representing a couple of objectors tonight, Ms. Laura White and LMK LLC. My clients obviously opposed the application for rezoning that's been filed by Golden Triangle, and we have a little bit of evidence we'd like to present to you. In answering you, Mr. Mayor, I think I've got Mr. Scruggs here, who I think will take maybe about 10 minutes with his deal, and I'll probably have 4 or 5 minutes for mine, and then we would reserve any other time for anyone else, obviously, that would like to speak before the board, if that pleases Your Honor and the members. Let me introduce to you Mr. Donovan Scruggs. Mr. Scruggs is currently the city planner and the director of planning and building for the city of Pascagoula, Mississippi. He's a graduate of Mississippi State. He has a master's degree in public policy and administration. He's a member of the American Institute of Certified Planners and is currently serving as its president of the Mississippi chapter. He's a recognized expert in the field of municipal planning, and he's made an analysis of the facts and circumstances surrounding the proposed application for rezoning, and would like to present just a short summary of those findings to the board.
Good evening, board. It's always great to be back in Starkville. I do love this town. The points I want to bring up tonight in reference to the proposed rezoning are that there really is no change in neighborhood character. I believe the applicant basically admitted this when he said that the only change that has occurred out there is basically some commercial properties that are actually consistent with the C2 use. So that right there pretty much it will indicate further in my analysis that there has been no real change. But a change in neighborhood character is one of the items that the state recognizes. The era is another case, and of course if you do a change in neighborhood character, it also has to have a public need. And I really don't know that a public need has been demonstrated by this application. And finally, what has not been mentioned is that a rezoning or any zoning regulations must be consistent with your comprehensive plan. The 2016 plan that is currently being considered or was voted on back in December really is not official yet, and the zoning should be based on the 2005 plan. When you look at the property that is in question and that is surrounding it, there really is no way to say there has been a change in neighborhood character. You look and you see fields of basically nothing but forestry land and some agricultural land, a manufactured home that is out there, and roads that hadn't even been paved, dirt roads. This certainly is not an industrial character, and an industrial character is what is needed to signify a change to this zoning. You see rolling hills, creeks, country bridges, and country life. This is not an industrial park, and it has not changed in that capacity. Even the 2016 plan recognizes that the area has not changed. The area to the top basically shows you the actual land use of property recognized by the consultants you paid a good bit of money for. It shows that the property is basically agricultural cultivated, forestry land, and some estate zoning there to your right. The yellow to the bottom is some single-family residential, but basically there is nothing in there that signifies any kind of industrial use. The map on the bottom is also a good map, and what this is, it shows you basically the properties that are vacant by their zoning classification. You've got some pretty high-density residential out there, which obviously has not occurred, but you've got some small trickles of that's a manufactured house here, there's estate living here, and there's single-family residential here. Aside from that, basically what you have is a good bit of vacant property, period. Vacant, undeveloped property. Nothing has been developed out there aside from some residential. The property to the map to the right also shows what we're looking at, an aerial view that shows basically nothing has happened in that area. A lot of green, and green means grass. Another great tool I like to use is Google Earth. This right here shows you a timeline of the way the change has occurred in this area since 1996. I imposed the road in 1996. Obviously, it was not there, but it came along around 2005, 2004. But we won't be hard-pressed to look at these images and find any change at all that has occurred. And I believe somebody used the word substantial change. Substantial change means substantial change. And there is no substantial change aside from a road. However, the road was constructed in 2003, 2004, ribbon cutting in 2005, but your comp plan was actually adopted in January 1 of 2006, and your zoning regulations actually occurred after that. So what you're looking at is this change has to have occurred since your comprehensive plan or since your zoning regulations. And basically, a new road that was constructed, 17, 16, 15 years ago is not a recent change that should warrant or substantiate this kind of rezoning. The plan does not adhere to your comprehensive plan. The plan rezoning proposal just does not match it. The consultant that was hired back in 2005 identified the area as potentially being multifamily and zero lot line. That may not be the best use for this area, but it's what your plan says. You paid somebody and they told you this is what is going to be done on that property in the future years, and a body before this actually adopted this plan and said this is the way we want to go. They did include this overlay district, which identifies the potential of mixed family or some commercial activity, both of which would be consistent with the C2 zone and the underlying zone that's actually there now. So the overlay district is consistent with what I think the plan calls for. Little density, little lifestyle centers like you have down in Ridgeland, but not an industrial park, and that is what's being proposed tonight. The old plan, the existing plan, the current plan, also addresses the way that we should look at industrial property. It talks about the adequate physical separation between industrial and other land uses. 40 acres of a fence 20 feet tall and trees 100 feet tall are not a significant buffer for an industrial park. 40 feet is probably about that back wall, and nobody wants to be that close to a industrial park, regardless of what kind of barriers or buffers are placed there. So I do think that your comp plan adequately says that this needs to be addressed. Overzoning is an item that is discussed in the old comp plan. How much industrial land is needed? I understand that the 200 acres, 200 plus acres at Cornerstone Park aren't ideal. Well, it would be nice to know that prior to building it. I believe you've got about 300 acres that are zoned M1 at the corner of 25 and 182. That was done for this applicant, and that has been decided that that's no longer viable. But the property still sits M1 zoning at that location. So it's still viable, and somebody could put any of those uses that are concerning at that intersection. And finally, the comp plan talks about the need for really getting into your zoning ordinance and creating a list or range of industrial uses. Therefore, you don't have to come forward and have all of these restrictions placed on the rezoning. When you have to have 5 or 6 restrictions placed on the rezoning and a reverter clause that says if it doesn't work, we want it back to the way it was, really indicates that the M1 zoning is not proper and does not fit the situation. You know, one of the problems I've heard that is occurring here in Starkville is that everybody's moving to the country to live. I wonder why. You've got some high density stuff. The students are great, but you know, oftentimes you really don't want to live next to the students. So what's needed? Estate-sized homes, homes that are big enough, large lot developments that can go and accommodate professionals that want to live in town. But really, there's no place for them. So the best place to put these new homes is out in the hinterlands as referred to by your comp plan. However, if the hinterlands are now home to an industrial park, nobody's going to live out there either. So we really need to look at what we're going to do out there, because this is some of the best property we have to attract some new single-family residential neighborhoods. This is a list of your principal uses or permitted uses and conditional uses that is in your zoning ordinance. The M1 is basically this black column that runs, it's one that's all filled in. And it's basically full of stuff that really nobody wants to live in. Of course, some of these uses are conditional uses and therefore would have to come before this body to get permission, but it still could happen. All it takes is a vote. Kind of like what we're hoping tonight. All it takes is a vote, and something that you would think never could occur could actually occur on those properties. The applicant mentioned that the C1 or B1 district, C1 district does actually allow some of these uses that they want. That would be great. You know, maybe consider expanding it, maybe do a hybrid zoning, do something that fits, but don't zone it to M1, because M1 obviously does not fit. The changes that were mentioned a while ago by the applicant, he actually used the word have been commercial in nature. Commercial in nature. That's exactly correct. All of these changes he identified through this broad neighborhood are commercial in nature. They are not industrial in nature. And to rezone property to an industrial park, the changes that have occurred need to be industrial in nature, not just a mobile home, a couple of houses, or a bank. Those are not industrial kind of changes that need to occur to meet the threshold requirements. The applicant has identified this as the area that he wants to rezone, or the link wants to rezone. And really this proposal is not consistent with what we call good planning policies. Basically, this area that he's wanting, that the link is wanting to use, does not have access to the road that they're moving out there to address. I mean, you've got to go down 389, and now that 389 is going to have a 40-foot buffer that keeps you from actually having direct access to 389. So it's really not ideal for the situation, and it really encourages what's called industrial sprawl out into the hinterlands, out into the country. It's not a place to be, and I believe there's some single-family homes that are located right here outside of 389. Not here, but right here across from where this entrance is going to be. And folks have invested a lot of money to live there, and now they're being told that an industrial park that's good for everybody else is going to be not so good for him. I believe back in 10, there was an exception that was granted to Miss Betty Bell to put a manufactured home out on Sudeth Road. This may be about the only change in neighborhood character that has actually occurred in this subject area. I mean, this is what's going on, and basically, if you look at what's typically allowed, what districts typically allow manufactured homes, they're agricultural. So what she did is basically consistent with the area, a manufactured home, and to go in and modify this or to discount that change is just grasping for straws. What's more interesting about this is that because I believe she did not want to convey her property, or what offer was not made. I'm not really sure the story here, but we've just created this little spot zone about the size of her manufactured home to include her. So she's surrounded on 3 sides now by a proposed M1 zoning. And I don't think anybody would want to live in that sliver. If your grandkids get off and run from one side to the other, they could be in an industrial park before you know it. So it's not exactly the country living she's grown accustomed to. Another spot zone that's being looked at that I don't think has been mentioned is the property that is actually closer to 82. It's a little small tract that's actually zoned R4 right now. Well, if this is not included and it's not modified to C2, it's a spot zone that's going to stick out there that really can't be used for anything as R4. Nobody's really going to go in on this location and put in a R4 type of use. So it really creates more problems than it does answers in some respects. I know we've talked about lack of, I think we've talked about public need. I'm going to say there may be a lack of public need with this. You know, every 7-Eleven or a restaurant or anything that pops up in town could consider, I'm an employment generator. I do sales tax. You know, they all have their benefits from locating there. However, we should not look strictly at the employment factor when determining public need. I mean, a site at Cornerstone, a site at Innovation Park, a site at at the Starkville Industrial Park, any of those locations would satisfy that public need. So it's not like this is the only property that could accommodate that public need. In fact, I went to the Link website looking, and although you wouldn't believe it tonight, by what I've heard, this site is said is fully served and ready for occupancy. That is an unbeatable choice. Unbeatable choice. I mean, that almost tells you right there that this is the best site for anything. The park, the Starkville Industrial Park, has 70 acres that are available. We have approximately 6,300 acres of industrial land in the Golden Triangle area. How much more is actually needed? 326 has been zoned for Innovation Park. And of course, we have the plan that was adopted just a couple of weeks ago. And what really needs to happen here is to slow down, look at that plan, and base your rezoning for industrial properties on that new plan, and don't live off a plan that was adopted in 2005 and that is being, you know, basically on its way out. Basically, it's my professional opinion that the rezoning should be rejected and that the property is not suitable for M1 designations. Thank you.
Very quickly, Mr. Mayor, I understand we've taken a little more time. I'm originally from Canton, Mississippi, and I've practiced law for about 30 years now in this great state. And a good portion of that time has been spent representing boards such as this. And in all that time, I've learned that zoning is one of the most important functions of local government. Quite frankly, it's because the planning for development benefits the entire community. The law teaches us that zoning ordinances are presumed to be reasonable and are adopted for the public good. There's a Mississippi case out of Panola County that states there's a strong presumption that comprehensive zoning ordinances are well planned and are meant to be permanent. The citizens and businesses which make up our communities rely on these ordinances in conducting their affairs and in making investments in all types of property. That is why the law only allows local governments, such as the city of Starkville, to change zoning ordinances in order to meet genuine changes actually occurring within the community. Zoning is not a speculative process. Golden Triangle, as they've mentioned, is proceeding under the second option noted by the vice mayor for the requirements and changes in zoning, being the changes occurred in the character of the neighborhood. The application, though, is a bit puzzling. It states that the property is not currently being used for anything but agricultural and residential. I noticed tonight we had a little expanded version than what was said in the application, and that I guess the neighborhood is expanded to include a quite large area. But if you take that as your neighborhood, there's virtually no property within the city of Starkville that can't be rezoned. Everything is changing if you're going to look at it from that broader perspective. Now, to be fair, now the application does mention a change in the area, and the change it mentions is the widening of 82 and, of course, Highway 25. But this was 12 years ago. Nothing has occurred in this area since then, really. I mean, it's not developed at all. There's been no material change. The law provides this board with good reasons not to rezone properties. There's a case out of the city of Greenville which states that preserving the zoning of an existing neighborhood or area is a valid city goal. Another case out of Ocean Springs, which I think was mentioned earlier, states that consistency with a comprehensive zoning plan is a valid reason to deny a request for rezoning. Both of these reasons are present in this case. The law also says that there's some bad reasons to rezone property. For instance, there's a case out of the city of Tupelo that says evidence of a potential for future development does not constitute evidence of a change in the neighborhood. Taking into future considerations is not change in the neighborhood. The Ocean Springs case also mentions that tax revenue cannot be a deciding factor, standing alone in a rezoning matter. I would urge each of you to keep these points in mind in rendering your decision this evening. I think Mr. Scruggs' report provides an accurate depiction of the property at issue. The timestamp photos really drive home the point that this area of the city has not experienced a change in the character necessary to justify the rezoning to M1 classification. The data shows there's ample vacant industrial property currently within the city and in the surrounding area, and there's no public need for another vacant industrial property. The planning department has noted there's a 20% requirement and 3/5 applies. I would urge the board to reject the application to rezone the property simply because it doesn't comply with Mississippi law. And obviously, I don't want to take any more time from anyone else. I have copies of the cases I mentioned if anyone would like them. Thank you.
There's a total of 8 minutes and 30 seconds remaining for anyone else that would like to speak in opposition to the matter.
Good evening. My name is Betty Bell. I am opposed against a rezoning or the industrial park road because, like they say, I'm Betty Bell and I'm sitting right in the middle of everything that go on. And I don't know, that first meeting I came to, they said they could put anything, you know, right next door to me or whatever. And that land was passed down from my grandparents to me. They raised me out there where I'm at now. And I just oppose it, and I just feel like, you know, if something happened to me, I wanted it for it to be left for my kids or my grandkids, would we be able to live there or whatever. And we are about the only family right down in City Road right now. All the others is up on the highway. In the zoning areas, it's all around me if y'all was to decide to vote on that. So I just wanted you to know my opinion on it, you know, and I don't feel like it would be safe for me or my family. And I have my two girls live down there also. That's where that other trader came in. We asked to get where I'm at. So that's all I wanted to vote, just to hear my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bell. You have 7 minutes remaining.
I don't read that long. Okay, my name's Laura White. I'm the one brought the attorney and the planner. And I was here in May and spoke when they first presented it and said, I had an issue with the rezoning. If you go back and look at the minutes, it's even written in there. So if somebody thinks they're surprised that we're really serious about it, I can't imagine why. I want to note that the Waldrop property is totally separated from the Stanley Stange property by a gravel road that MDOT has put a huge bridge on because they expect to have that much water flow on it. There is a creek that runs between Strange and Stanley, cuts across Waldrop, divides the Waldrop property in half, that flows into the Trim Cane and ultimately the Tom Bigby, and it forms part of the wildlife management area. So the water that will move through this industrial park is what feeds the waterfowl and the deer at the wildlife management area. So I think that's an important thing. I've talked to DEQ, they say there've been no permits requested, so no 401s about moving the sediment or any stream moves. The Army Corps of Engineers out of Mobile is the district office that will handle this property, and they have no pending applications, and it's not been discussed about whether the 404, which is some Clean Water Act thing, has even been started or looked at or mitigated. So when you talk $2 million in cultural mitigation, you're talking, I don't know how many million in water mitigation if you start trying to move that creek or downstream pollution. So I just want you to be aware of both of those factors that have not been brought up before, is how are we going to handle the environmental issues of the creek that provides water to our wildlife and the wildlife downstream. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. White. The total of 5 minutes and 22 seconds remaining for anyone who wishes to speak in opposition. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak in opposition? Anyone else who wishes to speak in opposition? Anyone else who wishes to speak? Seeing no one, Mr. Pace, you have a total of 12 minutes and 16 seconds remaining for your rebuttal.
I'd like to just address a few issues in response to some of the comments that were made by Mr. Scruggs a moment ago. He had mentioned that most of the changes we cited were changes to C2. That is correct. There were changes to C2. Of course, the standard for rezoning, we don't have to show that there's been lots of industrial development in the neighborhood to warrant a change in the zoning today. Merely that there be a change substantial enough to justify the rezoning. There has been commercial development in what we believe to be a broad view of the neighborhood. I will leave with the city attorney a copy of the case I mentioned earlier, just to be put into the record, which we believe gives this board the authority to take a very broad view when you're dealing with an area like this. I live in a subdivision just outside of Jackson. I consider it to be a neighborhood. It's a little planned development. There are houses in there, and perhaps the area within a few streets around that. Also on property out in the country. When I think about the area out there where that property is, it's a much larger area. Not just the one piece of property that was depicted up here tonight. We think it's too narrow in scope to just look at the pieces of property that touch the property that we're seeking to rezone. And the point was made, there has been very little development of this area in the past several years or since Highway 82 was completed. That is correct, but there has been commercial development along that corridor, which was what was envisioned when that corridor was created. The other comment was made that this in some way violates the 2005 plan. We included that as part of our original application package for the specific point of highlighting the fact that the 2005 plan suggests that industrial areas be located with an easy commuting time of labor force and possess access to the various methods of transportation required to ship materials and products. And furthermore, that such industrial sites should be made available at or near the intersection of major highways with direct connection to the highway systems being most desirable. We do believe that direct access to Highway 82 via a short stint on 389 does satisfy that criteria. Just to avoid any confusion about the conditions we had requested at the outset of this meeting about a tree buffer zone along 389, that would not preclude us from having an access road out onto 389 coming out of the proposed industrial park development or cutting trees for purposes of putting utilities in there. The city has invested a lot of money in the past several years, putting adequate water and sewer out to serve that property, capable of serving an industrial park. We don't have to, other than running lines in along the new street plan for the park, we don't have to go and make any significant upgrades to the city infrastructure to serve industrial customers with water and sewer. Another point was raised that couldn't we leave this as C2 or zone it as C2 and address these more manufacturing type uses from a conditional use standpoint. In a vacuum, that's sort of a laudable goal. In practice, and the folks at the link can tell you this, and in fact for other types of projects that have been presented to the city have told the board this, to be competitive in economic development, to attract manufacturers and employers to Starkville and Octavia County, you have to remove uncertainty for the prospects. You can't have contingent zoning that if you pick us, later on we'll vote on it to approve something. You have to be able to go in and at the outset, when you fill out that first response to a request for information from the consultant or from the company, you have to answer things like, do you own or control the property? Is it properly zoned for manufacturing? And you have to be able to say, yes, it is, subject to, in this case, a few conditions. If you don't check that box, you don't make that cut. There's no point in having an industrial park that you're marketing for prospects, absent being able to check the box. So while I can appreciate the comment, if the desire here is to create new businesses in the city that are engaged in manufacturing and industrial development, to create new employment opportunities for our citizens, that's not a workable alternative. I think another comment was made perhaps by Mr. Hembry that incremental taxes are not dispositive in terms of public need. I think the city attorney said earlier those types of things, however, are a factor lending towards public need. In the past 10 years, Lowndes County has attracted a number of industries to the county, such that there has been more than $5 billion of investment 15, 20 miles down the road. There was the Yokohama tire plant that Alderman Wynn mentioned at the beginning of this meeting that so far is in excess of $300 million in Clay County. And Clay County has developed some sites next door to that that come into the city for future industrial development. Octavia County and the city of Starkville, from a tax-based standpoint, has seen neighbors reap the benefits of having new industry coming into the community. Without this type of development and the requested rezoning, we missed the boat on that from a tax revenue standpoint. And while not a single factor that's determinative, is a factor that can be considered by this board. The other issue that was raised is there are thousands of acres across the Golden Triangle that could be developed for industrial use. That's true, but none of them are in Octavia County, none of them are in Starkville. To the extent that this board and the city are happy to see residents continue to get in the car every day and drive half an hour to an hour to go to work somewhere else and leave that tax base in the neighboring counties, that's up to this board to make a determination. Y'all forgive me, I keep having a little coughing fit, so I keep hitting the water bottle. And as for Ms. White's comments regarding environmental concerns, she is correct. We have thus far filed no applications with DEQ to get any sort of 404 permit for this project. At some point that will have to be done. There are no plans to relocate or mitigate the creek she mentioned. It will have to go through the Corps of Engineers. There will have to be a 404 permit issued, and we will have to plat out the properties within the park at some point so as to take into account those existing environmental conditions. I don't think there's any plan to reroute that creek or what have you, but that is a step that we will have to go through at some point before we can develop the property. But the zoning that we're asking for tonight is the first step, because without this, there's no point in taking that next step. So with that, again, happy to take any questions, and we'll see the rest of my time, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Bates. And I will not open the floor generally for any further comments in favor of, since that's how you chose to allocate your time. However, it's very important in a contested rezoning matter to have fair opportunities for both sides of the issue to be heard. I also recognize that the universe of opinions is not completely covered in for and against. So if there's anyone here tonight who may have more ambiguous feelings than I'm for it or against it, who wishes to be heard, you may do so by coming forward, and you'll be recognized to speak for a maximum of 3 minutes. Is there anyone who wishes to be heard on this matter? Is there anyone who wishes to be heard? Anyone who wishes to be heard? Seeing no one, that will conclude the public comment section of the public hearing, and we'll hear any concluding comments from the members of the board. Are there any concluding comments from the members of the board? Any concluding comments? Alderman Perkins.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Attorney, I just want to make sure the record is clear. I've handled a lot of these public hearings, you know, as it was in state agencies. Did you get this marked as an exhibit for the record?
All of the materials presented tonight and I've forwarded to Ms. Harden for the record.
So everything that counts for the applicant and for the objectioner, that's part of the record for purposes of this hearing?
That's correct.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, let me just say a very few respectful things. As always, let me just start by saying this. At the onset of this, I mentioned that there are a couple of cases here. One is a state case from the Mississippi Supreme Court that was decided on May 20, 1987. Board of Aldermen versus Connolly, C-O-N-E-R-L-Y. And that case indicates that where the Supreme Court noted that before a zoning board reclassified property from one zone to another, proof was required either that there was a mistake in the original zoning. And let me just pause right there. Mr. Sanders has indicated that there was no mistake in the original zoning, so that's not a contested issue. It appears from what I heard for purposes of the record for this hearing that there was no mistake in the zoning classification, so we don't even need to consider that for purposes of this hearing as far as I see it. And then the only other requirement that is left is that the character of the neighborhood had changed to such an extent, and the Supreme Court used the word to such an extent as to justify reclassification that there was a public need for rezoning. So as I see and understand the law from our state highest court, the Mississippi Supreme Court, and that is the court that has the final say-so on state law for state cases. So the matter of the change in the character of the neighborhood, before we can get to the public need, we got to make sure that the matter of the change in the character of the neighborhood to such an extent. And the Supreme Court said that the burden of proof to support a requested change in zoning was up on the applicant, who had to meet the requirements for reclassification by clear and convincing evidence. That's the highest standard that you have to meet, clear and convincing. Now let's look at the evidence that's before us tonight, clear and convincing, as to the change in the character of the neighborhood. And we got to follow the law, because ultimately this case may get to the Mississippi Supreme Court, I don't know. But the subject property came into the city of Starkville, Mississippi back in 1998. It came before this board for consideration, and this board approved this area, North Starkville. In case you may not be familiar with this property, for purpose of this record, it is north of Fire Station number 3. As you travel 389, that eventually take you to Clay County. So the city limits extend about 3 or 4 miles out, maybe, to the downward portion of that hill. But once you get to the top of that hill, before you go downward, to the left is Southern Road. You have this strange property, basically out there in this area that's been depicted on this map here, as I have known it. You have the Strange property, the Rutherford property, and the Southern property. And the Southern property is the property that is owned by the Wilburn Southern family. And as the evidence is shown tonight, all this property has basically been just farmland and agriculture. And this is just the Vice Mayor speaking. And given my familiarity with this area, just driving by this area, just straight talk here, there's no change in the character. And of course, I'm just one opinion. I mean, I'm not trying to speak for anybody. I just speak for myself and my constituents. But with this area, I mean, you don't have any change. This property has remained the same all the time. The attorney who represents the objection has clearly stated that, and I say this in great respect to the attorney for the proponents, is that that there's an attempt to expand the neighborhood. I mean, if you think about the Walmart store, that's way over the 12 bypass. That's not in this neighborhood. The rental property on 25, not in this neighborhood. All these things over there on the 25 bypass, it's not in this neighborhood. I mean, this is right here. When you leave Fire Station 3, you're going north, you cross over the 82 bypass, there to your left, you have the Strange property. If you take a left on Sutter Road, you have the former Charlie Rutherford property. That's how the road got named Rutherford Road down there. A prior board did that. You had the Sutter family, Mr. Wilburn Sutter, a longtime businessman, former alderman of the city of Starkville back in the 70s. I mean, owned that property. Miss Betty Bell lived down Sutter Road. As she correctly stated, she inherited that land from Miss Sylvia May. I mean, her mother, she inherited that land. You know, these people, I mean, they have a right to be here. I mean, I'm not speaking against economic development by saying these things. I'm just looking at the law, and I didn't make the law. I mean, the law was made by the legislature of the state of Mississippi. You know, you want the law changed, it had to be changed by the legislature, but the Supreme Court interprets the law. So the problem is, before you can legally do a zoning change, you got to have well, I'm going to not talk and focus upon the matter of the error in the zoning, because there's no error. We all concede that there's no error. So the only remaining factor is there a change in the character of the neighborhood to an extent that justifies a change in the character. So, I mean, the land is in the same character that it was in 1998 when it came into the city. There's been no manufacturing out there. There's been no commercial development. All that was just a wooded area out there where Mr. Sutter and his family and Mr. Wilburn, for their life, you know, and the Rutherfords, they farm, agriculture. Like the attorney for the objection said that this is green land. Regardless of how you look at it and how you package it, it does not meet the burden of proof, in my opinion. So, you know, as this matter, if it goes up to the Circuit Court of Octavia Hall County, Mississippi, to the Mississippi Supreme Court, to the Court of Appeals, you know, I just want the record. This is the Vice Mayor, Roy Perkins, speaking. I've been practicing law for 28 years. I live, born and raised in this area on down now Sun Creek Road. And the reason I'm saying that this is important, because I was born and raised on Sun Creek Road, the road that's now Sun Creek, out on Camp Seminar Road, so I had to pass this property every day. Still pass by, still on property out there. I mean, every time Dr. Strange property, that's all you need. Dr. Strange land, Charlie Rutherford land, Mr. Wilburn land. That's it. That's all you knew or heard of. The character has not changed. The neighborhood has not changed. So the Supreme Court say if it has not changed, then it does not justify it. So, I mean, I understand, you know, economic development is good. I'm not speaking against it, but I'm just talking about the law. I mean, I just have the duty to, as an attorney, and a board member, just to give my interpretation of that. I mean, I'm not speaking against anybody. And Mr. Mayor, I'm taking my time here because this is a very contested matter, and I want the record to be real clear if it goes up on appeal, because this is the only time you get to make the record. This is the only time, because from here on, the court, as I understand it, Mr. Alderman, you can correct me if I'm wrong, the court is going to look at the record that's made here below, because that's why I have a court reporter. So, like the attorney for the objection said that the proponents is expanding the neighborhood to such quite a large area. He's right. There's no material change. The attorney for the objection says that no change has occurred in this area. So before you get to public need, you got to get change to the character to such an extent. If you don't meet the change in the character, you don't get to public need. So, you know, even though if this board passes this tonight by a supermajority vote, I think, you know, the record is clear that there's been no evidence to show a change in character. I mean, what has gone there? I mean, what has happened? Rolling Hills was mentioned. I mean, Rolling Hills was there before this place was before it was brought into the city. Rolling Hills is a well-established neighborhood in Ward 6. It's a distance from this location. The Walmart, as mentioned on Walmart. Walmart has not even, the only thing we did for Walmart was just approve a preliminary plat. There's no indication Walmart is going to come. There's this rental place, that's not in the neighborhood. There's no business that has been mentioned tonight that is in the neighborhood. There's none. And that's why this rezoning should be rejected. And I'm not going on what someone has told me. I'm very familiar with this area. Well familiar with this area. The only thing that has happened, and of course the expert witness that the attorney for the objections presented mentioned about the approval for a manufactured home in 2010, but as he mentioned, the expert witness for the objectioners mentioned that did not bring about a change in the character of the neighborhood to such an extent to justify a reclassification of this zoning to an M1. So, if it passes tonight, it just may be a small, short-lived victory if it goes further. I mean, if they take it up to an appellate level. So I think we just need to just do the right thing. I know that there's strong interest in this project. They want it to pass, and economic development is good, growth is good, but at the same time, we have to look at the law. We have to look at the family values, the property value, but more importantly right now is the law. We cannot overlook the law in this state, in this great state of Mississippi. Whether we like it or not, it's the law. So, Mr. Mayor, with that being said, I just thought it was important for me to take the time and looking at this matter and fulfilling my duty as an alderman to give the benefit of my legal knowledge and my legal background and my familiarity with this subject property to make sure that I get all this information in the record. The court reporter has my name down, Roy A. Perkins of Starkville. She has that in. We want to make sure we clearly understand that the law has not been met, and I yield the floor.
Are there any further concluding comments? Alderman Carpenter.
First of all, I'm going to say I am a little under the weather, and I'm doing all I can do to be here, but I may have missed some of these questions. I had a couple questions in conversation that I wanted to answer, and they come from different angles, and different people may have to answer them. But I guess there were two cases listed, and one was in D'Iberville, and that chart we may want to turn around for the public at some point to let them look at. And I guess my question is to the city attorney, probably, should that case be considered? And to the gentleman that presented on behalf of the project, what linear foot distance was considered in that chart, and should we, city attorney, be considering, is that chart going to be justification for a change of character in the neighborhood?
The chart that's up on the podium?
This shows all the new development on the north side of town.
Yeah, I can't speak to whether or not change has occurred. That's a factual finding completely within the board's discretion. I can say that substantial record has been made tonight for the board to consider this issue, whichever way it wishes to vote. As to the D'Iberville case, the D'Iberville case did say that all of the property in D'Iberville north of I-10 could be considered as one neighborhood, and that was 20 to 25% of the town. But the court talked about how fairly debatable that issue was, and I'm quoting from the case. It says, given the record in this case, the circuit court was correct in upholding the city's decision. There was substantial evidence to support a finding that the entire section of the city north of the interstate corridor was one neighborhood. Here's an important part. The case goes on. While the record might have also supported the city council finding that the neighborhood was a smaller area favored by the objector, it was neither the circuit courts nor this court's, the Mississippi Supreme Court's, finding a fact to make. So how big the neighborhood is solely within your province to determine.
In your legal opinion, what should be the parameters of this neighborhood?
I don't have, the case law does not define a neighborhood, so I can't give you a legal opinion on that.
Okay.
It varies from case to case based on the specific nature of the property at issue.
And then secondly, I'll say that opinion, I definitely think there's a public need, and that was back to the first question. that I asked of the night that pertained to Vice Mayor Perkins' recommendation that not only should it be the public need has to be, you're saying that the public need has to hinder on the fact that there has to be a change of character in the neighborhood, correct?
Is that a question you made?
Yes, sir.
I think what he's pointing out is that both tests have to be met. And so I believe the Vice Mayor's argument, I don't want to put words in his mouth, is if the first part of the test isn't met, then by definition it fails because it's a conjunctive test. You have to have change and need.
And thirdly, I'd like just a note to say is I'm pleased and impressed with the fact that there were so many restrictive covenants, if that's not the correct term, excuse me, but there are so many restrictions placed on there with the index of supplemental information that you provided. So that was a lot of things that the developers didn't have to do that they did. And lastly, as it pertains to the buffer on the landscape ordinance, Section 8, currently there's just a 40-foot buffer, correct? Has there been any talk of extending that or any talk between the two parties involved and maybe getting that to a higher number where everybody's sufficient?
To me or my staff.
Okay, thank you. I yield the floor.
Alderman Manning.
Thank you, Mayor. I agree with many of the things that have been said here tonight, and I agree that it's our responsibility as individuals to define and understand the arguments that have been made. In my opinion, I could easily make the argument that the neighborhood is the bypass because the bypass roads were created as a means of bringing commerce into the city. And I think all of those can easily be considered as the neighborhood as defined by the attorney for the link. I don't have any problem with that at all. When it gets to the point of need for the community, I could go on and on and on about the need. In my job as director of the Career Center at Mississippi State, I work with employers and industry every single day. I see the economic impact that industry has in an area. I think the gentleman from Pascagoula could easily attest to the impact that Huntington Ingalls has in his city and the millions and millions and millions of tax dollars that Huntington Ingalls has pumped into that community. He also mentioned that there's a lot of industrial development area in the Golden Triangle. Well, while we're in the Golden Triangle does not pay our bills. The city of Starkville and the taxes that are generated here are what helps our schools. Those industries in Lowndes County aren't generating dollars for city of Starkville public schools. So that's not really a fair comparison in my opinion. We have a strong and significant need for industrial development. We have a strong and significant need to diversify our employment opportunities to provide a competitive wage for all education levels within our community. When that is done, the poverty level will go down significantly. When that is done, the unemployment level will go down significantly. You can't say enough about that. There is an overwhelming need for this in our community. The vice mayor has made arguments on one side, others on this board have made arguments on the other. If the courts have to decide it, ultimately the courts have to decide it. I think there's case law on both sides for and against that high-paid attorneys could cite. That's what they get paid to do. We'll have to decide what, as a board, how we want to vote and how we want to interpret this tonight, and then let it fall where it may. I'm in full support of this. I think this is something that has a tremendous need for our community. Thank you, Mayor.
Any further questions or comments by the members of the board? Alderman Nguyen.
I've spoken to this once. I'm going to speak to it again. That Sunday night, when so many of us watched our city as Golden Triangle being on 60 Minutes with Mr. Joe McHiggins of the Link, who represents our city for economic development. There was a female on there that was from West Point, Mississippi, who was the mother of 5 children. And she was once employed for Sara Lee. When that factory closed, she no longer had employment to be able to provide for her and her 5 children. I will never forget seeing that image on TV for as long as I live. She spoke at how she went and got those workforce training skills, and now she is over there at Eurocopter making some money to be able to provide for her children. That is because of economic development and through guidance and leadership from Mr. Joe McHiggins. While that is over there in Lowndes County, and I'm so happy for everything that has happened for Lowndes County, I'm elated Yokohama is in West Point. But it's time for the city of Starkville, and to my knowledge, we are not in violation of any laws, and if it be, let it go. And they will determine that in court. But tonight, our city sits poised to embrace a measure that will bring jobs here and allow those people to become gainfully employed. I've said it once, I'm going to say it again. I fully well support this measure. We're talking about our community. We're talking about the university. We all stand to win-win. It's a great situation to be in when everyone wins. This is what you call a win-win. There is never any measure that you can bring forward here in this room for our city where you please 100% of the people. If we had a measure on the table tonight that we would give every household $1,000 a month, you would have objections. Why should we give Miss Smith's household $1,000 when they are rich? Why should we give that household when they don't work? You can't please everyone. I have considered every email that I have gotten on this project, and I'm ready to move forward. I will be supporting it tonight. Mayor, I yield the floor.
Alderman Walker.
First of all, I'd like to thank both the applicants and the opposition for presenting good, strong cases on your behalf for this project. This is not an easy decision when it comes down to how you determine. I certainly agree with Alderman Maynard. I think the neighborhood in this condition or in this situation is much larger than if you're talking about a more developed area is much, much smaller. I think as Mr. Scruggs from Pascagoula pointed out, I think what you see in that is a whole lot of deficiencies in our 2005 comprehensive plan that was adopted by the city. The case for error hasn't been made in this. City planner, community development director, Buddy Sanders said there has been no error. But when you look since the bypass has been built, we've been for 14 years, and you have the entire string of that is on C2, and you have virtually no development along that. To me, that's the very definition of an era. It's the very definition of an era in looking of what you expect something to happen there, but it didn't ever materialize, nor do I think it will materialize in the future. And so from a legal perspective, I think this is a really difficult decision where you have to look at the case law and what has to happen. I don't think there's any question what is the best and most effective use of this property out here is not C2. It's not R4. Nobody's building apartments 10 miles from the campus and expecting them to live there when you have better places in close. So you have to look at multiple things to consider here. And I think long-term, what is the most effective and best use of the property probably is going to lean more to that M1 than it is to that C2 or certainly that R4 or R5 multifamily apartment type housing. Has the threshold for change in neighborhood been met? I think that's debatable. I think that is one that's potentially, that might have to find its way through the court to see. I, for one, think that the development that has happened in the C2 doesn't necessarily in and of itself equate to change in the neighborhood. That's just the development that is allowed to occur by right. So, I'm not sure where I'm going yet. I'm still thinking about where I'm going to vote on this, because on the one hand, I agree with Alderman Maynard. I think there is without question clear public need for industrial development. As many of you know, if you followed this, I did not vote for this project at the outset. Not because I didn't think that this was a reasonable location for industrial development to occur, but because I favored trying to maximize the assets that we already have. I didn't win that conversation, and I'm okay with that. I have all the confidence in the world that the link, no matter what site we choose, is going to be able to make good economic development happen here. So the question really comes down to this. Do you want it here, or do you want it not in Starkville or in Oktibbeha County? At the crux of the situation, that's what we're going to be deciding tonight. What's also as clear as day from the 2005 comprehensive plan of how this corridor is not going to develop into a lifestyle center, which nobody's building those much anymore, and they're certainly not going to build it on the north side of town anytime soon. What's also is clear at this point is that Cornerstone is a failure. It is a failure in terms of generating economic development opportunity from an industrial standpoint. And I believe that's what the link is recommending, why we needed another site. Of course, on their site, they're going to propose that that is, something that they're still marketing, which I appreciate y'all marketing that as hard as you can. But it's probably time to pivot. If we're going to really look and insist on industrial development in Starkville, the places that we have currently set aside to do that are insufficient. And we have to decide, we will be deciding tonight, I believe, the fate of industrial development in our city and maybe in our county. And I know this is a decision that nobody takes lightly because this is a big decision. And so with that, Mr. Mayor, I'm going to yield the floor.
Any further concluding questions or comments in the public hearing from the members of the board? Alderman Carver.
I think that we've exhausted most of the locations within Starkville. I think most of your previous comments, Alderman Walker, were correct in saying that we've kind of gotten to a point where if we're really going to talk about manufacturing, if we're really going to talk about and then this was shocking to me seeing that with the 14th poorest county in the state, if we're really going to talk about trying to find jobs for lower to middle class individuals, if this, this is a decision we have to decide tonight or soon. And I guess it came back all the way. I'd still like for the public to see that graph of all the development that's happened on the north side of town, and if that's justification for a change of character in the neighborhood. And it's debatable. I don't think it's going to be an opinion of the person looking at that chart and a person here and seeing if that's justification for that. I do think there's a public need. I think that if this does pass, that you'll see job creation out there. I think that you'll see over time, you'll see maybe lower income individuals get helped the most through this. I think it'd be good for many, many people in this county. This is hotly debated and highly contested. But with that, I also have to look from the Bell family standpoint. And one thing I'd like to offer tonight is a condition, if this were passed, that the applicant provide at least a 75-foot buffer. Most of that, if you'll look on that map, most of the buffer, and the way it was explained to me, and maybe Mr. Higgins can help elaborate on this, but most of that property, or most of the subject property line runs down tree lines. So if there were to be any kind of visual buffer, like Green Oaks has one on Stark Road against the Hewlett property, and it's about, I think Ms. Henderson could say it's 100 to 125 feet. And it serves its purpose. That's a big, tall set of trees that is a visual, if it's going to affect any kind of landscape ordinance. I would like to see. I just don't feel like the current landscape ordinance probably provides enough buffer for that. So I would be, if it comes to a vote tonight, or when it does, it's just to add more buffer. More buffer on the subject property here. And again, I think I think Alderman Walker said it best. It's just kind of this is decision time for the county. If we're going to really take a hard step and a hard look and see if we want to get into the manufacturing, if we really want to provide jobs for people, if we really want to do this, this is the time to do it. I don't think there's any available property left. I think everything that we've been seeing over the last 6 months to a year in presentations, we've probably been left behind by Lowndes County and Clay County. When I start seeing Clay County leave us behind, even without the ports and the waterways, it's something we've got to do something. I know we're a university town, but oftentimes I think that from a manufacturing standpoint, we've just been left behind. And Joe Max Higgins is, I know you and I have disagreed and butted heads, but he'll tell you what he thinks and he'll tell you what it takes to get there. And if we want to get there, that's something we should consider. So, thank you.
Any further concluding questions or comments? Alderman Vaughn. Yeah, let's finish this public hearing and then we'll move into one. Any further concluding questions or comments? If not, the city attorney is asked to be recognized.
Mr. Haviland and Ms. Corbin, did you guys bring the notices for this public hearing? If you could present that to the city clerk so we can get that in the record. Thank you.
Are there any further concluding comments from the members of the board? Seeing none, I will conclude this public hearing on RZ 16-11. Without objection, I'm going to take us into a brief recess. Any objection? Any objection? Seeing none, stand in a brief recess. Meeting will now come back to order. The next matter on the agenda is a public hearing on RZ 16-08, the Fair Oil project on Academy Road. And Mr. Sanders, would you like to introduce the matter?
RZ 16-08 is an appeal to the denial of the request by Johnny Fair on behalf of Robert Smith to rezone a portion of one parcel located on the south side of Academy Road between Hummingbird Lane and South Montgomery Street. The property to the north is zoned C2 and R5 and is currently used as commercial and residential. Property to the east is zoned R1 and is currently residential and vacant. Property to the south is R1 and is currently residential. Property to the west is zoned C1 in PUD and is currently residential and vacant. The parcel is currently zoned R3A. The applicant is seeking to change a portion to C2 general business. That portion is illustrated on this slide as the area in red. 23 property owners of record within 300 feet of the subject property were notified directly by mail of the request. A public hearing was noticed in the Starkville Daily News on October 19, 2016, and a sign was posted on the property concurrent with the publication of the notice. On November 1st, 2016, a petition with 13 signatures representing 6 property owners within 160 feet against the proposed rezoning was received by the planning department. On November 8, 2016, the Planning and Zoning Commission denied the request 5-1, citing no change in condition or public need. On November 10, 2016, the applicant submitted a formal appeal of the denial by the Planning and Zoning Commission to the Planning Department. A rezoning can only take place if one of the following conditions prevails: error and a change in condition. There has been 2 rezonings within a half mile since 2008. On August of 2008, 1200 Louisville Street was rezoned from C1 to R5. And on July of 2015, a portion of 712 South Montgomery was rezoned from R1 to R3.
Any questions or comments by the members of the board? Any questions or comments by the members of the board? Any questions or comments? Seeing none, we'll move to the public comment portion of the public hearing. This will be conducted in exactly the same manner as the previous public hearing. However, each side will be limited to 15 minutes in this case. And well, there is one notable difference in this procedure, and that is it comes to us on an appeal from planning and zoning. So I guess in this case, the applicant is also the appellant. And I'll ask the appellant at this time if you or a representative wish to come forward and begin your comments. And again, if you wish to in some way divide your comments, please let me know at the outset of your comments.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You'll have to excuse me. Y'all going to get out of short order tonight because my grandson gave me cold for Christmas, and it keeps on giving, and I think I've had laryngitis for 2 days now. I do have, before I start my time, I do have two handouts to give all the board members. And I would like to divide my time, 10 minutes and 5 minutes for rebuttal. And unless necessary, I won't use much of that rebuttal. I'll pass this one down. Tell me when you're ready. Mr. Mayor and Board of Aldermen, I thank you for your attention tonight. This is a rezoning matter of 2.86 acres south of Academy Road, the Robert A. Smith property, proposed to be rezoned by Johnny Fair. It's 2.86 acres out of a 12-acre entire parcel. The surrounding 10 acres belongs to Mr. Smith as well, but it'll remain R3A, which was what it was rezoned to several years back. The purpose in doing that is to provide a commercial corridor for a convenience market, as well as a little commercial strip center with 4 stores in it, and then provide approximately 40 homes on the back of the property with the 10 acres, which will create somewhat of a natural border. Jerry McBride, who is the developer that built the homes behind Pleasant Acres, is the contractor that's going to build those approximately 40 homes, which is about an $8 million project. It's not part of our rezoning, but that's what he's going to do with his property. With our property, as we said, it's going to be a neighborhood market, as well as a little strip center on that 2.86 acres. And as we've discussed a lot tonight about the criteria for doing this, is that there has been it's changed or changing conditions in the existing area, or and this is from the code, or the planning area generally, and the increasing need for commercial development within close proximity to community residents that make the change in the ordinance necessary and desirable and in accord with the public need. Nobody will dispute that on South Montgomery from Academy Road, south to Poorhouse, and even to Mount Olive Road, there's no commercial development. It's kind of an anomaly. You don't typically see this, but from Academy Road south all the way to Poorhouse Road, those big parcels of land have only been owned by 3 families, which are basically the Joneses, the Ramseys, and the Jacksons. So that's why there's never been any opportunity to do anything that would actually provide any kind of commercial services to anybody on South Montgomery Street. Now, there's been a question about whether or not there's a public need. I have a petition that I would like to present to you. It has approximately 135 names of people living on South Montgomery that are requesting that this be approved because they need these type services. This is a $3 million convenience market. They're going to have produce, a bakery, excuse me, and a coffee shop. It's not going to be your typical go buy beer, a gallon of gas, and a candy bar. We're trying to provide services that the people on South Montgomery would want. The reason this one is so necessary is that the next closest one is the Mr. Gillis Quick Stop on 12. That's a whole different market. He's capturing a whole different group of traffic coming on Highway 12. The other property that's on the west side of Academy Road, that's capturing another whole group of traffic as well. That's the Louisville Street, Highway 25 traffic, and west of Louisville Street and 25, because there's a huge number of units of apartments in that area, and they're capturing all that traffic. So this is going to disperse the traffic quite a bit in that area and make it more convenient for the people on the west side of Academy Road, more convenient for the people on South Montgomery, as well as more convenient for the people on 12. It's going to distribute the traffic more. Another reason this is going to be necessary is the university's in the process of completing the south entrance. Right now, as of today, there's 4,500 cars a day going through the South Montgomery Poorhouse Road intersection at that red light. They anticipate that traffic count to go up to between 1,500 and 2,000 more cars a day. So those people are going to need access to the type things that our clients are going to provide at their store and keep the people off 12. That was the whole purpose of that south entrance, is to alleviate some of that traffic on 12 So it doesn't make sense for us not to give them an opportunity to buy something at a convenient place to Academy Road in South Montgomery, and then force them back up to 12, which is what we were trying to get them off of in the first place. Also, at a meeting of the homeowners, basically was a tailgate party of the Academy Place Homeowners Association. They presented a letter, which you've got a copy of it. It was presented at the P&Z board, but for some reason it didn't get into your packet, so I wanted you to have it. It was provided by James Quinn, president of the Academy Place Homeowners Association. And if you don't know Mr. Quinn, he's from the Delta, but he's a MAI Master Appraiser. He's a member of the Master Appraiser Institute, so he's one of the most qualified appraisers in the state. In his report, he put in here about our project. It is understood this proposed development project is for approximately 2-acre site, which being the cost range of $3 million. Fair Oil Company has a website available that reflects a reputation and history of good management over 80 years in business with successful quality operations. Their operations on 82, the fast break operation, was actually featured in one of the comprehensive plans that the city had prepared several years back. At that meeting, he said, after consideration and research of various factors and issues, the consensus opinion and comments are to allow this rezoning request for this estimated parcel to be approved for rezoning from its present R3A status to the C2 general business zoning status. And I know my client, Johnny Fair, has been very diligent in meeting with the homeowners south of Academy Road, whose property actually abuts the property that we're talking about. And they have come together and worked together to try to come up with some conditions that would make this palatable to not only my client, where the project is still feasible, because we are talking about $10–11 million project, but it makes it more palatable to the neighborhood, which was our intentions to start with, is to try to work with the neighbors and do what we call a charrette, in a sense, to try to get everybody to come together and make a decision. Well, you're not ever going to get 100%, but we feel good that we've got the people who actually join this that are within 160 feet, other than the church. Their building is beyond the 160 feet, or maybe not their first choice, but they're in agreement with the conditions that Mr. Fair and they have worked out. Wasn't involved in that process. That was something that I encouraged them to do as a unit, and as a factor of trying to bring the community together instead of splitting into teams and trying to come up with a winner or loser. Everybody work together and try to come up with some type of agreement that people can deal with. Now, the other item I would like to point out. Okay. I gave y'all, we were prepared to do a PowerPoint, but we decided that we probably weren't going to get 30 minutes. So that is a printout of the PowerPoint that Mr. Fair prepared. And I want to go over a couple of things with you. Mr. Fair is a local person. He lives on Country Club Estates. His wife works here. They built their 2000 store, that one I was talking about on the fast break. This is going to be the most expensive store he's done. This is going to be a high-end store, and we feel like that's going to be a major draw to the people in South Montgomery, because they have nowhere to go. They're either going to be forced through that loop back to 12, or they're going to have to go somewhere else. The one thing I think is really critical about this lot is shovel-ready. It's ready to be built. It doesn't require any infrastructure from the city, no sewer or water, electric, no TIF, no money to help us get started. It's going to create 10 to 15 jobs, over $300,000 in payroll, $100,000 in sales tax, $600,000 in fuel tax. Now, some of those taxes will be drawn from other stores. We know we'll be taking some from them, but we're trying to create a market for that south end of town as well, because there are plenty of people that live at Browning Creek and other areas there that'll be coming into this market. We anticipate to generate $30,000 in property taxes just on our store, and $100,000 of new of overall taxes, including what the developer that's building the residence is going to do. One thing I would like to mention is that this is consistent with what's going on with the new comprehensive plan. Actually, it's really a little less dense, because when you look at the zoning for the suburban corridor, it is primarily commercial, particularly retail, and multifamily housing. Well, the properties behind this is gonna stay R3A, which is a medium density. So there won't be any multifamily housing. So I think this is gonna be a real plus to the neighborhood. One of the biggest reasons being, if somebody else that's not a local person came in here and bought this, and all the ordinances and regulations get in place with that new zoning ordinance, somebody from out of town comes in, they're gonna do whatever they wanna do within the code. And I would like to present this petition as evidence. I'll bring that around to you.
Now, at this time, we'll hear from anyone wishing to oppose the proposed zoning change, and I'll ask, again, if the first person who approaches would tell me how you'd like to split your time. Otherwise, we'll keep a running clock.
My name is PK Thomas. I live at 103 Brookwood. In that map there, my lot, I can't really, it's the part that kind of juts out into the yellow section. That's where I live. I am one of the homeowners, obviously, who adjoins the property. So I'm here to speak on behalf of us who have been working with Johnny to make this conditions list. I appreciate Mr. Moore saying this is not our first option of what to happen with this property. We were hoping that it would stay R3A and that someone would build entirely residential on the whole thing. That was our first choice. However, with working with Johnny and the sheet that we've given to Jason, if all of those conditions are met 100% with no changes as of right now, the ones of us who adjoin the property are satisfied with moving forward. I know that our neighborhood has been working really hard on trying to help everybody in the neighborhood feel good about it. As we've said, we probably did not do that, but we at least, as people who adjoin the property, all of us are on the same page with the list of conditions being met 100%.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. There is 13 minutes, 48 seconds remaining.
My name is Libby Gill. I live at 205 Willow Bend, and I'm in Ward 4. We're probably, I'm not sure, I think we may be, we're like right across the street from the house that has the backyard. So we can see the pasture. We can see what used to be the pasture. I come to you tonight to ask for your vote to keep the property on Academy Road, R3A, totally. Mr. Fair and our subdivision presented our positions to the Zoning Commission in November. The Zoning Commission voted overwhelmingly. I thought it was 6-1. I heard tonight it's 5-1. Nevertheless, it was overwhelmingly in our favor to leave the property R3A. We were all actually on the same page until just 2 or 3 days ago. And that's when some of our members became, in my opinion, fearful of the comprehensive plan being explained to them. And because of that, in my opinion, they chose to use some leverage while they still had it. But not all of us chose that, because we didn't want a service station behind our house. We didn't want our children which our neighborhood, if you've ever been in that neighborhood, it's a very quiet neighborhood. Children play in the streets. We've all actually been on the same page until a few days ago. And it really, in my opinion, was based on fear. They're afraid of what the comprehensive plan would do if they didn't make concessions. Following the vote of the zoning commission, they also went ahead and apparently approved a preliminary plat for Mr. Jerry McBride. Now, he's proposing from 40 to 50 homes already. And if you multiply, say, 2,000 times that for real estate taxes, that's what, 80,000 or more that would be generated every year. And it's my understanding that if it remains all of R3A, he will probably have the option to finish those houses out behind our house, behind all these. And so instead of a service station, we will have homes and children. We're not opposed to progress, but we are opposed to this zoning. No amount of signatures can change the situation. How many of you would like to walk out in your backyard and see a service station where your children are going to play? I asked Mr. Johnny Fair, I said, do you have children? And he said, yes, ma'am, I have 3. I said, would you want a service station in your backyard? He said, no, ma'am. No, ma'am. But then he told me that would not happen, because he said, but it won't happen because I back up to the country club. We don't all back up to the country club, but we all enjoy living in Starkville, raising our families, paying our taxes, hoping that we will be treated fairly when we buy property. I cannot see that this service station is going to enhance any of our property. I also did not see a compelling change in the neighborhood. Almost every part that butts up to it is residential. Academy Place is residential. We're residential. Across the street is the church. As far as the need goes, I counted 14 service stations in this town just today, going up and down the road. And if you come to our stoplight, you come out of our drive and go to our stoplight, there's, as Mr. Moore said, there's a service station right down there on the corner. And if that one's not close enough, there's one right down on 12 in Montgomery. When I saw the preliminary plat that Mr. Fair showed us, he's calling it a wonderful neighborhood market. I said, are you going to sell liquor in this neighborhood market? Yes, ma'am. I said, do you have to? Well, that's a business decision. Then I couldn't see that being in our backyard. I just can't. You can make it as pretty as you want. You can put brick around it. You can put a 10-foot fence. You can put some trees. You're still going to hear the boom boxes. None of us really wanted this battle. I was hoping that when the zoning voted 5-1, we were done with this, but we weren't. But I will say this, if you can find it in your heart to vote to just leave it like it is, that no one in our neighborhood will be disappointed, because we've all been together of not wanting a service station. And that's how I'll leave it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Gibbs. There is 6 minutes and 27 seconds remaining for those wishing to speak in opposition.
I'm David Nagel. I'm at 104 Brookwood. The previous discussion was very illustrative. In order for there to be a rezoning, you have to prove 2 things. There's a change in the neighborhood, there's no error. There's a change in the neighborhood, and there's a public need. Well, I've been there more than 25 years. The neighborhood has not changed. The only change has been to go from commercial to R3A for that lot. So the change has been toward commercial. And secondly, if you go half a mile down Academy Road, there's a gas station. If you go half a block, there's a Dollar General, a convenience mart. If you go another half a block, there's another gas station. I understand there's been another gas station platted in on the corner of Lynn Lane and Highway 25. There's no public need. There's no change in the neighborhood. So if you vote in order to make this change, you are telling those of us citizens of Starkville, you don't want to follow the rules and you don't care about neighborhoods. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Knapp. There's now 5 minutes, 20 seconds remaining for those wishing to speak in opposition. Is there anyone else wishing to speak in opposition? Is there anyone else wishing to speak in opposition? Anyone else wishing to speak in opposition? Seeing no one, Mr. Moore, you have 5 minutes for rebuttal.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A couple of things I did not get to address earlier, and I've provided a drawing of that little sliver that's going to come out of a request, and I think the drawing that I gave y'all provides a bearing description of that. So we can include that in any conditions. But if you look at that U shape around our subject parcel, those people work with Mr. Fair to discuss conditions that would make the project palatable to these people. Now, on South Montgomery, I didn't get a chance to mention, Mr. Jones is working on an 80 home development now. That's going to create a need for these people to get services. Just below the Adelaide, they're starting their next phase. They're doing the engineering work on that. So that's going to create even more people there that are going to have the need for these services. So you can look, there was a lot of discussion earlier about what a neighborhood is. If you take Academy Road south to Poorhouse, South Montgomery is almost a neighborhood. It's almost an entity into itself. And those people have no services and no access to reasonable services and convenient services without compacting everybody onto Louisville Street and packing them on Highway 12. So it's gonna be a benefit not only to people that are traveling up and down 12 and on Louisville Street, it's gonna be a benefit to the neighborhood as well. My client has met with these people several times to try to come to an agreement. I think we have a very viable agreement. Nobody's trying to threaten or intimidate or use scare tactics against anyone about what the comprehensive plan may or may not end up being or what the ordinances may or may not be. But I mean, it is in writing and you can look at it, and you do need to kind of make a decision about what may or may not happen, because you just don't know. But this is a viable plan. It's going to give them less density for the residential than they would have if some person from out of town comes and buys it several years from now. And so it's a plan that's gonna really, it's gonna benefit the neighborhood. Mr. McBride is, he's in the process of going in there and spending $8 million on residents that he intends to sell. And surely to goodness, he wouldn't spend $8 million if he saw this as a liability to what he's trying to do. It's purely an asset. He considers it a major asset to his development. And they're gonna happen simultaneously. So based on that, I believe that there's sufficient evidence in order for the board to approve this rezoning. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Now, is there anyone whose feelings are ambiguous on the matter that wishes to speak neither for nor against? Is there anyone remaining who wishes to speak? No, you don't get a rebuttal. He gets a rebuttal because he doesn't have the benefit of hearing your argument before he speaks. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? Seeing no one, are there any concluding questions or comments by the members of the board? The city attorney would like to be recognized.
Mr. Haviland, you may have mentioned this, and if I missed it, I apologize, but did you do a calculation of 20% objectors within 160 feet of the proposed rezoning? And what's your finding on that?
It definitely meets the threshold. I did not have the actual percentage. Just because of if you just look at the east, the number of lots there, and the south, and especially to the north, you got 1/3.
So the written protest triggered the supermajority vote in this one as well. And would you please present the notice into the record too for this hearing? Thank you. Supermajority.
Per the finding of the city planner and the city attorney, this matter will require a supermajority. That means 5 members of the Board of Aldermen must approve the rezoning request. Are there any further questions or comments by the members of the board? Any further questions or comments by the members of the board? Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, that will conclude the public hearing on RZ 16-08. Next matter before you is a public hearing on RZ 16-10, a rezoning at the corner of Jarnigan Street and Loomis.
Mr. Mayor, let me let the record reflect, I'm going to recuse myself from the public hearing and the discussion on the matters on RZ 16-10 at 35 Jarnigan Street. I'm going to step out, Mr. Chairman, let me know when I'm ready.
The vice mayor is recusing himself on this matter. That means he will exit the room. We'll give him a moment to exit the room for the public hearing. Mr. Secretary.
RZ 16-10. This is a request by Bob Reed on behalf of Maggie Harris to zone one parcel from R5 to T5 located at 35 Jarnigan Street. Property to the north and east is zoned R5 and is currently multifamily residential. Property to the west is zoned R5C2 and is currently multifamily residential and a church. Property to the south is zoned T5 and is currently multifamily residential. On December 13, 2016, the Planning and Zoning Commission voted 4-1 to recommend approval of this request with 3 conditions. 36 property owners of record within 300 feet of the subject property were notified directly by mail of the request. A public hearing notice was published in Starkville Daily News on December 19, 2016, and a sign was placed on the property concurrent with the publication of the notice. As of this date, the planning officer received 3 phone calls inquiring about this request and none against. Rezoning can only take place if one of the following conditions prevails: an error, change in condition. On January 12, 2012, the Board of Aldermen adopted form-based code for Mississippi Highway 182, Main Street, University Drive, Lansing Street, Russell Street. As a result, 84 parcels were rezoned to either T District or Civic District. On March 15, 2016, one parcel at Hartness Street was rezoned from R3 to T5. And on August 8, 2016, one parcel, corner of University of North Montgomery, was rezoned from T2 to T5. The Planning and Zoning Commission recommend 3 conditions. No building on the site shall be more than 2 stories in height. 1 parking space must be built per bedroom, and no commercial activities on the first floor.
Questions or comments from the members of the board? Any questions or comments from the members of the board? Any questions or comments? Seeing none, we'll now move into the public comment portion of the public hearing, and it will be conducted in the same manner as the previous public hearing. Each side will have a maximum of 15 minutes. Is there anyone now wishing to speak either as the applicant or on behalf of the applicant? You'll have a maximum of 15 minutes. If you'd like to divide your time, please let me know.
Yes, sir, I'd like to divide my time. I don't know that I'll need it, but I will like to reserve that right anyway.
How much time?
I'll just be 5 minutes right now. I'll be very, very brief. My name's Bob Reed. With permission of Ms. Harris, who is the executor of the Bonnie Howell Estate, we are seeking rezoning of the property at the corner of Jarnigan and Loomis. It's a single family residence right now. It's zoned R5. We're seeking T5. It's in the Cotton District, which is a highly sought after area for housing for students. I own a little house around the corner on Nash that my daughter lives in, and my son will live there next year. It's the nice thing about the Cotton District, everything is in walking distance. There's food, there's restaurants, all kinds of stuff all real close. So everybody walks. The T5 is set up for an urban type feel, which is what the Cotton District is, where the properties are moved closer to the street, parking's in the rear. And does it qualify for change in the neighborhood? There's T5 right across the street to the south, and across the street to the southeast is T5, and I think there's proposed more T5 to the north off University Drive. At the Planning Commission meeting, it was the question was raised, could we build some condos or whatever, leaving it as R5? And the answer is yes, we could if we had we get a variance for this and we get a variance for that and a variance for this. Well, ultimately you could do it, but the same goal would end up being looking like a T5. So, I agreed to the conditions. No retail, not just on the first floor, on the second floor. I agreed to the height limitations and parking, because parking over there is kind of tight. So I agreed to those conditions, and I'll stick to that. No change in those conditions at all. So that's it.
Thank you, Mr. Reed.
Thank you.
All right, is there now anyone wishing to speak in opposition to the matter? Is there anyone wishing to speak in opposition? Anyone wishing to speak in opposition? Seeing no one, Mr. Reed, in spite of the fact that you don't have anything to rebut, you still have the time.
Speed things along.
Is there anyone now wishing to speak for or against or indifferent to the matter? Anyone wishing to speak?
Good evening, my name is Alvin Turner. After looking at the Church of Christ Holiness, and they have them boxed in, if someone tried to find the Church of Christ, they have to go all the way around Russell Street trying to find the church. Now, if we box in the Church of Christ on Jonathan Street, it's going to be hard trying to find the church because the church is boxed in. Let's try and be respectful of the holy place. If you box it in, people that's not from here cannot find. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Turner. Is there anyone else now wishing to speak? Anyone else now wishing to speak? Anyone else wishing to speak? Seeing no one, are there any concluding questions or comments by the members of the board? Any concluding questions or comments by the members of the board? Seeing none, I will conclude this public hearing on RZ 16-10. Give the vice mayor a moment to re-enter the room. The next matter before you is the discussion and consideration of FP 16-05, a request for final plat approval for a 5-lot subdivision, a 32.13 acre parcel on the south side of Lynn Lane and north side of Academy Road. Discussion.
Same move.
Motion has been made by Alderman Carver to approve of FP 16-05, a request for final plat approval for a 5-lot subdivision of a 32.13 acre parcel on the south side of Lynn Lane and the north side of Academy Road, directly north and east of Starkville Academy in a C2 zone, with the parent parcel number 102I-00-013.00 as presented. Alderman Carver, is that your motion?
Yes, sir.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion has been seconded by Alderman Nguyen. Alderman Carver, do you wish to speak on the merits?
No, sir.
Any discussion? Any discussion? Any discussion? Saying none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Motion clearly passes. The next matter before you is a discussion and consideration of RZ 16-11, a request to rezone several properties located at the northwest corner of North Jackson Street and Highway 82 to M1 for the proposed industrial park. Prior to opening the floor, I will make a few comments on this matter. And y'all forgive me, I am now starting my last 6 months in office, so I suppose everything makes me a little bit nostalgic now. And I did indeed get a little bit nostalgic as we were having the discussion, the public hearing on this matter, listening to the discussion about what the bypass is. The bypass as a unit has probably been discussed as much as any property in the city of Starkville in my 8 years of doing this. As a matter of fact, I discussed it so much during my first run for office 8 years ago, I can still remember what I said. The soundbite that I repeated over and over again is we must develop the bypass in a manner that is attractive and economically sound. And since then, I have sat here as mayor many nights and listened to debates about what that is. And I suppose we could debate into infinity what attractive and economically sound is. That's probably one of the reasons it makes the type of soundbite that people use in elections. Nevertheless, I believe about as strongly as I believe any land use policy that we've discussed in my 8 years, that area is nothing if not a neighborhood. And the thing that made it a neighborhood originally was the development of the bypass. Collectively, portions of Highway 12 extended, Highway 82 and Highway 25 that opened in 2004. Prior to that, it was a collection of farmland with little or no connection to local public roadways. And you put major state highway access through the middle of it, of course, it dramatically changes the nature of the property. And in the case of these properties, it forever tied those properties together. As we have discussed as a matter of policy. We have debated about everything that can be debated about the bypass. We have debated whether it needed to be developed more. We have debated whether development on the bypass was urban sprawl and it should be discouraged. We have debated interesting topics like what nodal development is. I remember quite a few discussions through the years relating to the bypass about how it should be developed in a nodal form. And we've had many discussions about what a node is and what that means. One thing that has been constant through it all is we have considered the bypass as a unit, as a neighborhood, as something regardless of your philosophy, that is to be taken as a common consideration. And I think there can be no doubt, just by virtue of what it is and what it became when the roadway was built, that the properties adjacent to those highway corridors are a neighborhood. I think there can also be no doubt that is one of the most rapidly changing neighborhoods in the city of Starkville. As more recently, we have seen much of the large-scale commercial activity occurring on the bypass, and for good reason. That is where now some of the best traffic counts are in town, and it is a breeding ground for commercial activity. And it is the proposed commercial activity that has led us through the years to many of our debates that we have had that have gotten often contentious about how it should be treated. Nevertheless, I think it is beyond debate that it is a neighborhood that is rapidly changing. And I'll also get nostalgic about the other side of this coin, which is the public need argument. Because from the very beginning of my time doing this, it seems we have been discussing the aim of getting more jobs in this community that pay a living wage. Because one of the tragedies about the workforce numbers that we produce as a community is that we are almost always, you heard some of the more current numbers in the public hearing tonight, but almost always we carry a lower than state average unemployment rate and a higher than state average poverty rate. Taken together, that presents us with quite a problem. It says the people in this community don't mind working and don't mind working hard, but for too many people in this community, there are not jobs that pay enough to feed a family. And that is a problem that we must all grapple with. And I can say, the 8 of us that are here, the additional board members that I served with in my first term, have all done our best to grapple with that problem. Now, philosophical differences have emerged, and philosophical differences could emerge as to whether this is the best thing to get at that problem. But in my mind, as I've said on many occasions before, this is a solution, a potential solution to the problem that is worth the risk. And I think maybe now, more than ever before, it's easy to make that case. As we have spent the last month in the national spotlight as a region for being the renaissance of rural advanced manufacturing development in the United States. So what reason is there, if you have an issue with getting jobs that pay a living wage so that the hardworking people in this community that want to feed their family can do it, what reason is there to think that we couldn't be successful in the midst of this renaissance of rural advanced manufacturing if we had the assets to do it? And this is all about providing the assets to be able to effectively compete for those advanced manufacturing jobs that we would agree would help us get at that issue and potentially offer a solution to what is plagued us. So with that said, I think there's no doubt that in this case, we are dealing with a neighborhood that is changing and changing rapidly, and the proposed rezoning addresses a public need that we all recognize as something, if our community is ever going to achieve its finest moments, we're going to have to overcome. With that said, I recommend approval of the rezone. Discussion.
Mayor,
Alderman Webb.
I defer to Alderman Little.
Alderman Little.
I'd like to say first that both sides presented some very good points, and it was interesting. I noted we ranked 14th in the poverty, 14th in poverty, Occidental County in the state, and I was unaware of that. And then I was talking to someone at the break. And that may be somewhat skewed due to the fact that it counts all the students in there. So that gives me hope there that we're not doing quite as bad as it sounded earlier. But there was a slide earlier that showed a 1996 photo of the property prior to the bypass going in. And then I believe around 04 or 05 when it went in, that to me is significant change. I don't know how you could argue that it's not. You had basically landlocked areas, mass pasture lands that now have four-way bypass access. I would think that increased the property values, and most cities that I've seen that have a bypass, a lot of times it kills or hinders their downtown or their Highway 12. That hasn't happened here. We've got something different here, being a college town. We've got MSU out there to the east, which is an economic engine in and of itself, and I think that's why everything gravitates toward MSU. I believe this can be and will be a catalyst for the north area of town that others will ultimately benefit from. And I've seen some of the conditions. I believe the link has been working with some of the family members and property owners to try to make some concessions. And that was presented earlier to the board, and I think they've made some good concessions. But I understand, as being a property owner, I would be concerned too what's going, the unknowns. But I believe the city and county as a whole going forward would benefit, and I think there is a need. You know, we sit around, and we had this conversation last spring when we were discussing the project. We sit around and at the water cooler or drinking coffee and talking about, well, why is Lowndes County getting a PACCAR? Why are they getting another Airbus or Severstal or Yokohama going to Clay County? When we just don't have the resources here to offer to bring them here. We've got Joe Max Higgins was just last week named by the Mississippi Business Journal Businessman of the Year. It's on the 60 Minutes documentary recently within the last month. I think the link in his hands can bring this project forward, and it's going to be a success. We've got the new community university going up over there. I think a $38 million investment, maybe wrong on the number, where we're going to give some skilled training to the workforce and put our folks to work. Those that are not driving to Mississippi State to work, that are going across county lines. I got several neighbors that drive over to Lowndes County that work every day. They choose to live here. This will give an opportunity for folks to stay here in the county, inside the city. We challenged the link to go out and find property located in the city, big tract of land within the city that had the pipe, water, and gas resources. They found out we didn't have the gas resources, that Starkville was going to be faced with a shortage of gas down the road. With or without this industrial park. They landed $17.5 million in gas and power, 60 megawatt substations with Atmos, or with Fort County, rather. So, that being said, I'm going to be supportive of this. I feel like the need and the change is there, and I'm going to be supportive. Thank you. I yield.
Alderman Webb.
Okay. Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of the board, I have a motion. Move approval of RZ 16-11, a request to rezone several properties, 82 to M1-1 for the proposed industrial park with the parcel numbers 115-21-007.00, 115-21-010.00, 115-22-026.00, 115-21-010.01, 115-21-010.2, 114-20-003.00, 115-21-006.00, and 115-21-007.01 on a finding of fact that the neighborhood has changed to such an extent as to justify the proposed rezoning and that there is a public need for this proposed rezoning. Mayor, that is my motion.
The motion has been made. It's been reduced to writing. Placing a copy with the city clerk. As such, without objection, I will not ask for it to be reread. Seeing none, do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion has been seconded by Alderman Little. Alderman Wendy wishes to speak on the merits.
No, I do not.
City Attorney wishes to be recognized.
Alderman Nguyen, does that finding of fact, is it based on the written materials and oral presentation presented by Chris Pace on behalf of the link tonight?
Yes, it is.
And does it include the self-imposed conditions presented by the link in their written materials, Section 1, subsections A through K, and Section 2, subsections A through B?
Yes, it is.
Thank you.
City Attorney, those that you listed out, is that the 2 pages in there?
Correct.
Okay.
So the motion includes the conditions. Discussion, Alderman Ball.
Mayor, you and I and Carver came here together, and for my 7.5 years, this is what I've been fussing for, been complaining about jobs in this city. You got to look out jobs for people that drop out of college. They deserve to make more than 25 hours. And people that go to school and finish high school, then you got to drive way to Tupelo, way to Columbus just to make $7.25 an hour. I supported this when it first became before us. I supported it. It would be hard now for me not to support it again because I know what the city of Starkville needs, and it's something that I've been pushing for, that we find better jobs for the citizens of Starkville. Just like we went out and increased the salary for every city employee to $10 an hour. So I feel like if we miss this opportunity now, I don't believe this opportunity to come before this board again, and the boards that come in the future. I don't believe we'll never get this opportunity again.
We recognize the Vice Mayor, Mr. Mayor.
Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To all due great and high respect to our outgoing mayor, Honorable Parker Wiseman, to all of my distinguished colleagues, and those of you who are here and those who are joining us by TV at the appropriate time. Certainly, economic development is a very important aspect in our community, and economic development, growth, and pro-business are things and matters and items that I dearly respect. But being an attorney of 28 years, I think it's very important for me to look at this matter based upon the law. Now, in looking at this matter based upon the law, I'm going to vote against it, and I'm going to summarize why. Because the law that is before us tonight was interpreted by our high court in the state of Mississippi, being the Mississippi Supreme Court, and as an officer of the court, I'm going to follow that law. And that law, in the cases that are already on the record, the part in question is that has there been a change in the character of the neighborhood that has changed to an extent that warrants a change in rezoning, and is there a public need? And the objectioners, by and through their esteemed counsel, has tendered an expert witness to this panel tonight to clearly indicate that there has been no change. The proponents and others, and I say this with all great respect, wanting to tender a prevailing argument that the neighborhood extends all the way over to the Highway 12 bypass. And of course, and there's been some mention that it includes a Walmart neighborhood market store, and that's a store that, for the record, does not even exist. The proponents also advocate about a rental store that is located on the western end of Reed Road at or near its intersection with the Highway 25 bypass. That is not in the neighborhood. It's just like when we took up the property out there in the Cotton District, talking about this T5 classification as whether or not over there on Russell Street, was that in the Cotton District? The Cotton District, and with that instance, the board said, well, that is a neighborhood in and of itself, just like this property right here. The collection of farmland is the neighborhood. You know, Rolling Hills is not no neighborhood. The car dealership, whatever the name of it, and all due respect, Parker McGill, I'm not familiar with the name, but certainly that property is not a component of this neighborhood. You know, this neighborhood, to those of us, including the vice mayor, who are very familiar with this neighborhood, is just the property in the area in question. The neighborhood is the area that includes the property that belongs to the Sutter family, the Charlie Rutherford family, the Strange family. That is the neighborhood, and the Bell family. That's the neighborhood. You know, now we're talking about the bypass. This property, again, was brought into the city in 1998, some 18 plus years ago. So, you know, in all great respect to all of my distinguished colleagues, they're great leaders, but we just differ on this. And the properties, does not reach out to include any area. I mean, we're talking about land that is to the north of this of 389, does not extend the neighborhood. So they're clearly, number one is, we got an admission from Mr. Buddy Sanders, the Director of Community Development, who clearly stated that there is no error. And the reason I say that because I think one of my distinguished colleagues mentioned the argument about error, but there's clearly no error in this. So that eliminates that argument. So if this matter goes further, I think the only argument is whether or not there's a change in the character of the neighborhood to such an extent that warrants a rezoning of the property, and if there's a public need. And certainly we hear the statistics about this is a poor state, poor county. But before you can get that, as the city attorney clearly answered the question to my distinguished colleague from Ward 1, before we can address the issue of public need, we got to first show that there's a change in the character that reasonably justifies it. If you don't meet that test, then you don't get to the public need. So we just differ here, but I don't think the neighborhood is just like Hospital Road. I don't think Hospital Road goes way all over, include, on the south side of town. I mean, just due respect to the neighborhood. I mean, we all have our own neighborhoods. We know what we don't intend for our neighborhoods to include. We don't expect for Central Avenue to include 4 or 5 miles south of Starkville. I don't expect Hospital Road to be a part of the distinguished area down South Montgomery. That's just the way it is. Stonegate, that's their neighborhood. So just like this farmland, yes, this collection of, in closing here, yes, this collection of farmland is still a collection. It's still the Sutter's property. It's going to always be Mr. Wilburn Sutter's property. It was his property. It still is, and it's going to be.
That is his family. He worked for that. That's the neighborhood. Dr. Strange lived out there. That was his property, and it still is his property. Mr. Charlie Rutherford, whether you like what I'm saying or not, that's the neighborhood. We disagree. I'm going to get outvoted 6-1, but I'm still going to say it's the neighborhood. So with all that being said, the neighborhood, that's just, it doesn't reach past that area. I mean, we have a lot of people, I mean, they see this as a driving force to bring in jobs. Yes, fine. But does the law warrant this? Does the law allow this? The facts do not fit this situation. The law does not allow this change in the character of, does not allow this rezoning. And I'm going to be consistent about how I have always looked at this. As an officer of the court, I'm going to make sure I just look at this, and the facts do not fit this. So with all this being said, and great respect to everyone, and you know, when we get to vote, we'll just move on. But these, Miss Bell here, Miss Betty Bell, I mean, I don't want to leave you out either. I mean, you've been living on Sutter's Road ever since I've known you. And we about 60 years or so thereabout. You know, I mean, you've been living out there. That's your neighborhood. Your mother, Miss Sylvia May Perry. You know, I know all these people. That's the neighborhood. Grew up out there, driven past there every day. Still past their own land about 3 or 4 miles or 5 or 6 miles down the road from you. The neighborhood. No basis to approve this, but you know it's going to get approved. But that's the neighborhood, Mr. Mayor. I want to yield, and you know, thank you, Mayor. I mean, and let me say this, Mr. Mayor, in closing. I enjoy this job, but I respect all of you very highly. I just enjoy working with all of you. So, but want to yield with all that being said. Okay.
Mr. Mayor, Mr. Joe McHiggins, will you please come forward? And will you please bring Mr. Joey Deason with you?
Mayor, can I call a question after this?
Yeah.
Okay.
I would be remiss if I did not have you to come to the front tonight just to toot your horn just again. Thank you so much for what you've done for our city. I look forward to working with you in the future. Thank you so much, Mr. Deason, for all you do to help Mr. Joe McHiggins be a success. And once again, we enjoyed you. And I got my picture with that celebrity tonight. Again, Mr. Higgins, thank you so much. Do you have anything you'd like to say to us?
No, ma'am, we're just ready to move forward.
Thank you so much. I yield, Mr. Mayor.
All right, Alderman Carver, do you wish to make a motion to close debate?
Yes, sir.
Motion has been made by Alderman Carver to close debate. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion has been seconded by Alderman Nguyen. This is, a motion to close debate will require a supermajority. All those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. Well, that's something everybody can agree upon. We will now move into a roll call vote. Please answer yay, nay, or abstain when the city clerk calls your name.
Alderman Carver.
Yay.
Alderman Nguyen.
Yay.
Alderman Little.
Yay.
Alderman Walker.
Yay.
Alderman Maynard.
Yay.
Vice Mayor Perkins.
Nay.
Alderman Vaughn.
Yay.
By a vote of 6 in favor with 1 against, the motion passes. The next matter on the agenda is a discussion and consideration of RZ 16-11, a request to rezone several property. No, sorry. Next matter on the agenda is a discussion and consideration of an appeal by Johnny Fair of the decision to deny a rezoning request to rezone a portion of plus or minus 12.5 acre parcel with property number from R3A to C2. Discussion.
Mr. Mayor.
Alderman Walker.
Thank you all, and thank you all for that are still interested here in this matter. It doesn't quite get the buzz that the industrial park got, but is nonetheless as important to the folks that live in Stonegate and Academy Place as anywhere else. And the neighborhood knows that when this was going through planning and zoning, I met and told you that my response would be that I would be in opposition to this rezoning, because I felt that that was what the neighborhood desired. Since that time, the neighborhood has had several meetings of which I attended. They were in discussions with the applicant, Mr. Fair, about looking at what they may be able to do there. And through those discussions, I am going to support this rezoning if the 7 conditions that the landowners that abut the rezoned property are agreed to. So with that, Mayor, I would like to make a motion for approval of the rezoning with the following conditions.
You have these reduced to writing.
Reduced to writing, yes, because y'all bear with me, I apologize. The following conditions are a part of the rezoning application for the subject property. 1, the rezoning shall restrict the types of uses allowed in C2 to include only the necessary uses for the proposed development, to wit, business offices, eating and drinking establishments, general and retail services, excluding standalone department stores, liquor stores, and car washes. 2, a 30-foot undisturbed natural buffer along the rear property line and 30-foot undisturbed natural buffer along the side property line in areas that border the Stonegate subdivision, excluding Lot 20. Undisturbed buffer shall mean the existing vegetation and grade to be left in its current state. Exceptions will be made for the installation of a fence or for water detention. The applicant shall maintain the conditions of the existing buffer, including the existing ditch, to ensure that water does not back up into neighboring properties. Condition 3, a 10-foot high solid fence on all edges that border the Stonegate subdivision from the west corner of Lot 8 to the west line of Lot 24 to be built and maintained in perpetuity by the applicant. 4, existing trees and vegetation within the required landscape buffer shall count toward the required plant units of 120, with additional plant units as reasonably determined by city staff. 5, building lighting shall have light shields that hide the source of light. Only lighting required by city code shall be put on the rear side of the property and on the rear and side of buildings. Lights that impact Stonegate subdivision, excluding Lot 20, must hide the source of the light with light shields. 6, the development shall not have outdoor speakers on the outside of the community market building or the commercial tenant building, excluding the fuel station intercom system on the community market building. 7, the area on Exhibit A, which I will show in one moment, called Tract A, intended to be sold, shall not be part of the rezoning, and this property shall be deeded to West Baumgartner. And so just Daniel, if you can, so if you can point right there, as part of the neighborhood working and the developer working with the neighborhood to try to accommodate that tentacle piece of property has been agreed to be deeded to West Baumgartner. And just for the record, so the city attorney can see, there is a line here that demarcates essentially what, Mr. Thomas, that's your property 103, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
So that property line is essentially going to extend thereabouts in a straight line manner and hit not on the corner of 204, but very close to 204 per this exhibit that was presented today.
Motion has been made by Alderman Walker. It's been read and reduced to writing. I've placed a copy with the city clerk. Without objection, I will not ask for it to be reread. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion has been seconded by Alderman Nguyen. City attorney is asked to be recognized.
Alderman Walker, is your motion based on a finding of fact that the neighborhood has changed to such an extent as to justify the proposed rezoning and that there's a public need for that rezoning?
Yes.
And the basis of that would be the materials presented by the applicant or his attorney and the oral presentation of that attorney and your personal familiarity with that area, given that it's in your ward?
Yes.
Alderman Walker, do you wish to be recognized?
No.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please signify by saying nay.
Nay.
By a vote of 6 in favor with 1 against, and I have Perkins casting the lone dissenting vote, motion passes. The next matter on the agenda is discussion and consideration of PP 16-17, request for preliminary plat approval for a two-lot subdivision on a 12.73 acre parcel on the south side of Academy Road. Discussion.
Mr. Mayor? Mr. Havlin, can you pull up, I have just a couple things on this one. And one to talk to the applicant. When I look at this, what you're proposing and the conditions that were placed on planning by planning and zoning, 2-story limit.
Are we on PP 16, 17?
This is a preliminary
Oh,
plat.
sorry. Apologize.
Do you wish to maintain the floor?
No. Sorry.
Motion has been made by Alderman Maynard to approve of PP 16-17, the request for preliminary plat approval for a two-lot subdivision of a 12.73 acre parcel on the south side of Academy Road, east of Hummingbird Road, in an R3A zone with parent parcel number 102I-00-021.00 as presented. Alderman Maynard, is that your motion? Yes. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion has been seconded by Alderman Little. Alderman Maynard, do you wish to speak on the merit? Any discussion? Alderman
Mr. Mayor, I do want to, and this is just for the record to be clear, this is approving the preliminary plat. However, when it's time for a final plat to be approved, the final plat should, in that point, have the updates, including the piece that is not getting rezoned, the little piece, that piece will stay R3A. That's being deeded over to West Baumgartner, and the new property line should be addressed on that final plat.
Alderman Little.
I hope that this is the last board to hear a zoning on this piece of property. It seems like, looking through the history of this thing, it's been batted around since 08. At the end of 08, that term and that board ended, and then second meeting in July, it came up again and got flipped. So I hope we're done with this one once and for all. I appreciate your work with the property owners adjacent to you, Mr. Fair and Johnny. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Motion clearly passes. The next matter on the agenda is a discussion and consideration of RZ 16-10. Vice Mayor, you fail. We'll give the Vice Mayor a moment to exit the room. Discussion. Alderman Walker.
Now we're on this one. I thought the other projects just wouldn't finish, but now we're done. First of all, I'm excited. I'm excited for Miss Maggie that she's likely going to have her house resold, and that property is going to be redeveloped. I'm encouraged by that. And looking through the documents that got approved at Planning and Zoning, you're seeking a T5 designation, and you are accepting a restriction of a 2-story building height. You're exceeding the parking requirement, which is only 1 per dwelling, and you're accepting 1 per bedroom, so that increases the number. Obviously, I understand that you want to have parking. The question and what is concerning for me in my neighborhood, I live in the area right adjacent to the Cotton District, and I'm very familiar with it. And when I look at that, can we zoom in just a little bit? The part that I want us to be, again, planning and zoning, our recommendations, and those are, as a member of that board, when I served with the 2 people that are still there, Mr. Lovelace and Mr. Moore, I know they take every matter very seriously, and they look through it. But at the end of the day, they're making a recommendation. And it is my opinion, when I look at, this is the comprehensive plan that we passed at our last meeting. And I know this is difficult to see, but I'm going to ask Daniel to be my pointer. If you see the big white strip that's right there, that's Oddfellow Cemetery. So now everybody has their landmark, right? You got Oddfellow Cemetery. That's on the west side of the Cotton District. If you look at the red lines that has hatching in it, that color, that is Russell Street and Loomis. If you look at just to the north of that, you see University Drive and how that leads to downtown. What you're seeing there in the new comprehensive plan, they call that urban corridor. That ties in directly with what the transect districts that were passed in 2012. So that is without question Transect District, T District, and so forth. T5 makes a tremendous, T5, T6 are appropriate in those zones, no question. But when I look at what's sandwiched in between, you see all the other area. That is what they're calling existing traditional neighborhood development. I believe that that is critically important. And here's what I mean. Mr. Reed, I want your project to happen, and I believe it can happen doing exactly what you want. I just believe you got the wrong zoning classification, all right? And what I'm saying that is nothing inside of that interior would be considered corridor or zone T5. And the reason for that, what the Transect District is, it's about high-density development. And the further you get from that transect, it's not necessarily a straight line, but the further you get from that transect, the less dense the development gets. So as an example, in the new comprehensive plan, where we have areas that are called rural place types, that would be, in equivalent terms, that would be more like a T1, okay, or the natural buffer areas. That's what that would mean. So what the issue is if you look, go back to this slide right here. And this is where, to me, it's the crux of the matter of trying to do a development, but trying to get the wrong classification in there. You don't have to zoom out so I can read this. This is under Transect districts, and the first thing that, when you look at the code of what it says, it describes a T5 district. It says, a T5 district consists of heavily settled lands and is primarily mixed use in character. That means that you're talking about vertical mixed use. Think Ben 612, the blue building, the purple building. Vertical mixed use, high intensity development, T5 like. Okay? High lot coverage and multi-level buildings create strong spatial definition of outdoor spaces. T4. T4 district consists of moderately settled lands, primarily residential in character. And if you think about what Jarnigan Street is, if you think about what Nash Street is, if you think about what Cotton Row is, if you think about what Loomis is, if you think about what Colonel Muldrow are, all of those interior streets, with the exception of Maxwell Street, are predominantly residential in nature. Not mixed use, but residential in nature. T4 does allow a mixture of uses, but it's not nearly to the extent that T5. Now, if you can go back to that other map one more time, Daniel. I strongly believe that if we were to rezone the lot across to T5, what you are going to see happen, based on the landowners that are there and others, is that you are going to see the entirety of the interior of that neighborhood come and seek a change to a T5 or a T6 that I don't believe is in the long-term best interest of my neighborhood. I don't believe that's in the long-term best interest of the Cotton District. And based on what I've seen the drawings that you're proposing, I don't believe you need that designation to be able to do the development that you would like to do. And so I would offer the motion like this, to deny the request to T5, but approve the request to T4, and since we're down zoning, with the following three conditions. With the primary building height be allowed to be 3 stories, which right now T4 allows for 2, T5 allows 4. I'm meeting in between. That a 3-story building being on the corner lot where you would transition into the interior of a neighborhood, I think a 3-story building allow it and makes sense. I would say that the maximum lot coverage of 80%, which right now T4 allows a maximum lot coverage of 70%. T5 allows a maximum lot coverage of 80%. So you're still getting that T5 lot coverage, okay? And you're still getting close to that height, and you're already a self-imposed 2-story limit, so we're good there. And I would come back to say the parking, I would say parking is one per dwelling unit as the requirement. That's what's required in T5. What's required in T4 is 1.5 per dwelling unit. So I would give you the T5 dwelling unit, but looking at the T4 language, that way if you have 4 units and you want to have 4 parking spaces, great. If you feel like that you need 8 because you're going to have 2 cars there and you're going to have guests, do it. That's really the parking on these very small lots, which this is a small lot. The parking and the size of the building is a huge requirement in determining how much development you can have. What the beauty of the T districts is what limits the development is how much parking can you have. And in this case, I believe strongly that you can accomplish all of your goals with T4 with those three conditions and allow you to develop that property and do it really well without potentially knocking over that domino that then would result in that entirety of what is the Cotton District to go from 2 and 3 stories to 4-story buildings that all look like the Whitney. And if your daughter lives in the district and you've been around there, the Whitney is not the character of the Cotton District. And if we allow all of that to go to T5, it will look like the Whitney. And the character of that neighborhood will continue to erode, and it'll look a lot more like Russell Street than it will like the interior of the district. And I don't believe that's your intent of what your project would try to do. But it is my opinion that if we pass T4, it has my wholehearted full support. If it's for T5, I don't think that I can support this because I see that as being a major domino that will drastically change the character of my neighborhood.
Mr. Reed, the city attorney has advised that the board can take this matter up in the way that Alderman Walker has described, but you have to consent to it. Do you consent?
Yes.
Alderman Walker, did you make that in the form of a motion?
I believe that I did.
And do you have it written?
No, just the, no, I will write it. Give me 2 minutes.
How about a brief recess?
Yeah, give me 2 minutes recess. I have the conditions, but I
Without
don't have
objection.
Sorry. Somebody get it. No, I just need to put the motions. No, I've got it.
To order.
Mr. Mayor, I move approval of RZ 1610 to rezone one parcel from R5 to T4 located at 35 Jarnigan Street with the parcel number 101D-00-094.00 with the following conditions. 1, primary building height 3 stories maximum. 2, maximum of 80% lot coverage. And 3, parking at 1 per dwelling unit. That's minimum.
Motion has been read and reduced to writing, been placed with the city clerk. Without objection, I will not ask for it to be reread. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion's been seconded by Alderman Little. Alderman Walker, do you wish to speak on the merits?
No.
Any discussion? City attorney is asked to be recognized.
Same question, Alderman Walker, is your motion based on the finding of fact that the neighborhood has changed to such an extent as to justify the proposed rezoning and that there's a public need for that proposed rezoning?
Yes.
Based on the facts in the staff report, those presented by the applicant and your personal familiarity with the neighborhood?
It's changing, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Motion clearly passes. We'll give the vice mayor a moment to re-enter the room. And Mr. Sanders, I mean this is no disrespect to you, but thankfully that concludes your business for the evening. The next matter on the agenda is a discussion and consideration of authorizing an insert to be placed in Starkville utility bills informing customers.
So moved.
Motion has been made by Alderman Walker to approve of inserting or placing an insert in Starkville utility bills informing customers of sanitation and environmental services 2017 holiday schedule as presented. Alderman Walker, is that your motion?
Yes.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion's been seconded by Alderman Little. Alderman Walker, do you wish to speak on the merits?
No, thank you.
Any discussion? Any discussion? Any
Mr. Mayor.
discussion? Alderman Little.
I'd just say, Ms. Gandy, I think you're gonna be working with the mayor on putting something together as far as a calendar, or just showing a sheet showing the holidays and when we're gonna have citywide. Is that only 4 times a year, is that right? The citywide pickup? I was thinking it was 4 myself, but. I just had several calls and emails and just a lot of confusion. I think going forward, this putting an insert will help alleviate that early in the year. People can't say they weren't notified, and they can tape it to the refrigerator, do whatever works for them on that. So thank you for doing that.
Mr. Mayor, may I be recognized?
You may.
Mr. Mayor, I hope that the next mayor and the next administration will relook at these pickup days for sanitation around Thanksgiving and Christmas, because this Tuesday and Friday route gets left out a lot. So if I get reelected, I'm certainly going to put a lot of emphasis on these pickup days on this Tuesday and Friday routes for Thanksgiving and Christmas, because I think this past time period, the pickup was just Tuesday from week to week, and you know, we need to do a better job in planning for that. You know, just once a week is just not going to cut it. So, and that's going to be one of my goals if I get reelected, to make sure we get this pickup on a regular basis on this Tuesday and Friday, just like we're doing on this Monday and Thursday. And so we need some consistency citywide, and hopefully I'll get reelected, whoever the next mayor is, and I'm going to want to have a sit down and discussion with them so we can try to move things more progressively with our city. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion?
Yes, sir.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Motion clearly passed. The next matter on the agenda is the consideration of approval of advertising for letters of interest for the school board. Discussion. Motion has been made, there were several of y'all. Alderman Perkins, by Alderman Perkins to advertise for letters of interest for an appointment to a position on the Starkville Consolidated School District Board of Trustees, with a deadline for the letters of interest being 5 p.m. on February 15th, 2017, as presented. Alderman Perkins, is that your motion?
Yes, sir.
Do I hear a second? Second. Motion has been seconded by Alderman Maynard. Alderman Perkins, you wish to speak on the merits?
No, sir.
Any discussion? Any discussion? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Motion clearly passes. The next matter on the agenda is a discussion and consideration. Motion has been made by Alderman Walker to approve of Ward 6 discretionary funds to be used for patching and overlay of Tabor Street in the amount of $31,468, and the installation of a crosswalk at the intersection of East Garrett Road and North Montgomery Street in an amount not to exceed $800. Alderman Walker, is that your motion?
Yes.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion has been seconded by Alderman Perkins. Alderman Walker, do you wish to speak on the merits?
No.
Any discussion? Any discussion? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Motion clearly passes. The next matter on the agenda is a consideration and approval of Ward 6 discretionary funds to be used. Motion has been made by Alderman Maynard to approve of Ward 6 discretionary funds to be used for patching and overlay of a portion of Mohawk Street in an amount not to exceed $2,700, with the construction commencing at the intersection of Aztec Street and extending in a westward direction for 60 linear feet as presented. Alderman Maynard, is that your motion? Yes, sir. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion's been seconded by Alderman Vaughn. Alderman Maynard, do you wish to speak on the merits? Yes, sir. Any discussion? Any discussion? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Motion clearly passes. Next matter on the agenda is a discussion and consideration of appointing an individual to the Municipal Airport Board with a candidate to fill a vacancy for a term that ended December 31st, 2016. Discussion.
Mr. Mayor, may I be recognized?
You may.
Mr. Mayor, I wish that anytime we put an ad out that we got the quality of candidates that we got for this position. All three candidates were highly qualified, and I just appreciate having the opportunity to be able to review candidates in packages like that. With that said, one stuck out more than others, and I would like to make the recommendation that Bo Burke be appointed to the airport board.
Motion has been made by Alderman Maynard to appoint Bo Burke to the Municipal Airport Board to fill a vacancy that ended December 31st, 2016. The current term will expire December 31st, 2019, as presented. Alderman Maynard, is that your motion?
Yes, sir.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion has been seconded by Alderman Nguyen. Alderman Maynard, do you wish to speak on the merits?
No, sir.
Any discussion? Any discussion? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Motion clearly passes. Next matter on the agenda is consideration of compliance with bonding requirements and duties of Cotton Mill Marketplace LLC.
May I be recognized, Mayor?
You may.
Mayor, I just wanted to point out for this board that the initial vote that we had required that the developer, Mr. Mark Nicholas, complete the 54 square yards of asphalt by the end of 2016. That has not been done. Mr. Nicholas passed on 6 weeks of no rain and great weather to do that. and now it is still not done. Right now, Mr. Nicholas, because of that, is incurring liquidated damages of $500 per day, $3,500 per week. And at some point in the near future, if that's not done, I plan on calling the bond that was put up for that so that this work can be done. But I'm fine with letting him incur some liquidated damages in the meantime for that. The other issue that, and I hate that Mr. Sanders has left, but I will call him tomorrow.
He's here.
Oh, there you are. I thought y'all had gone. Mr. Sanders, in looking at that property, I noticed that the silt fence has completely deteriorated in several areas and is no longer in place. If that is an active construction site, which I'm not sure it is, the silt fence needs to be there, and there's also a lot of overgrowth, much like that was in place on the Family Dollar property that we required them to clean up. So I would appreciate it if you could take a look at that as well, because we need to make sure that that's taken care of so we don't have additional runoff going into the road there. So Mayor, no motion required there. I was just filling the board in that had not been done. Nothing at this point. He's incurring $500 a day.
Next matter on the agenda is the consideration of appointing a city elections commissioner to replace Kayla Gilmore.
May I be recognized, Mayor?
You may.
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that we report James N. McKell to complete the unexpired term of Kayla Gilmore in the City Election Commission.
Motion has been made by Alderman Maynard to appoint James N. McKell to fill the vacated, unexpired term of Kayla Gilmore as a city elections commissioner. Alderman Maynard, is that your motion?
Yes, sir.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion has been seconded by Alderman Nguyen. Alderman Maynard, do you wish to speak on the matter?
No, sir.
Any discussion, seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Motion clearly passes. Next matter on the agenda is a request for approval of the claims docket.
So moved.
Motion has been made by Alderman Maynard to approve of the City of Starkville claims docket for all departments, including the Starkville Utilities Department as of December 22nd, 2016, for fiscal year ending September 30th, 2017, as presented. Alderman Maynard, is that your motion?
Yes, sir.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion has been seconded by Alderman Walker. Alderman Maynard, do you wish to speak on the matter?
No, sir.
Any discussion, seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please signify by saying nay.
Nay.
By a vote of 6 in favor with 1 against, and I have Perkins casting the lone dissenting vote, the motion passes. The next matter on the agenda is the consideration. Motion has been made by Alderman Carver to approve of a Cone Care Plus agreement for vertical transportation for 2 elevators in City Hall, as presented. Alderman Carver, is that your motion?
Yes.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion has been seconded by Alderman Little. Alderman Carver, do you wish to speak on the matter?
No, sir.
Any discussion? Alderman Perkins.
Mr. Attorney, turn to page 1 on that agreement that start off with the heading service location. Let me know when you're there.
Correct, and that's the one that's been initialed by the provider.
Yes, sir. Go down to the board state price at $508 per month. You see what that initial is there?
Correct.
That figure, should that figure have been changed from 7,680, if you multiply 580 times 12?
It should be commensurate with $580 a month.
Okay, put the calculator on that. See, you get $6,960.
I do.
Okay, Mayor, that needs to.
Without objection, I'm gonna treat it as clerical,
Yes, sir.
and the change will be made to the document. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Motion clearly passes. The next matter on the agenda is a request for authorization to advertise to fill the vacant position of maintenance worker. So moved. Motion has been made by Alderman Maynard To authorize the advertisement to fill the vacant position of maintenance worker in the landscape division of sanitation and environmental services department as presented. Alderman Maynard, is that your motion?
Yes, sir.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion has been seconded by Alderman Nguyen. Alderman Maynard, do you wish to speak on the matter?
No, sir.
Any discussion, any discussion, any discussion, seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Motion clearly passes. Next matter on the agenda is a discussion and consideration.
So moved.
Motion has been made by Alderman Nguyen to approve of an agreement for 100% reimbursable grant funding with the Justice Assistance Grant in an area of hotspot policing in the area of overtime and equipment in the amount of $37,596 as presented. Alderman Nguyen, is that your motion?
It is.
Do I hear a second? Motion's been seconded by Alderman Maynard. Alderman Nguyen, do you wish to speak on the matter?
No, I do not.
Any discussion?
I just want to know
Discussion?
exactly what is hotspot? I mean, is that something that's targeted for, you got a high crime area or?
Not necessarily a high crime area, but just areas of concern, just like the Cotton District, with all the personnel that comes in there because of the bars and such. So
Large crowds, high activity, right, Chief?
exactly. So we try to $25,000 of that money will be used for overtime. And if you remember, you guys approved last year where we were awarded $98,000, and we got a SUV out of that. We got 4 cameras out of that, and out of this money, we also gonna get 2 additional cameras.
Have we been able to utilize some of our auxiliary police, like the chief, at all, since they were sworn in?
They don't wanna work for free, so.
Well, I mean, with some of this funding, I know you guys get overtime and worn out and need time off, and these guys, I think, we sworn them in and.
Well, what we do is that, with that is we put it up on the board for all the officers here who work full-time. We give them the first chance to work these. So it's kind of like a reward for them,
Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Motion clearly passes. Next matter on the agenda is request for authorization. Motion has been made by Alderman Carver to approve of Greg Perkins traveling to Pearl, Mississippi to attend the Mississippi Water Supply and Pollution Control Short Course on February 12th through 17th, 2017, for a total cost not to exceed $950 with advanced travel as presented. Alderman Carver, is that your motion?
Yes.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion's been seconded by Alderman Nguyen. Alderman Carver, do you wish to speak on the matter?
No, sir.
Any discussion? Any discussion? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Motion clearly passed.
Move to go into closed session.
Motion has been made by Alderman Little to go into closed session to determine whether there's a need for an executive session. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion has been seconded by Alderman Vaughn. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. I'll ask the public to clear the premises so the board can begin closed session deliberations to determine whether there is a need for an executive session.